Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been working the I-29 corridor for 11 years. From Fargo to Kansas City, occasionally as far as the Gulf when the pay is good. If you drive a route long enough, you stop seeing it. Your hands know when to shift gears before your brain does. You could drive in your sleep. Maybe that's what I was doing that night in October. Maybe I was asleep the whole time, and everything that happened was just my imagination, and trying to make sense of something it couldn't process. I don't know anymore. The load was refrigerated pharmaceuticals. Time-sensitive, high-value stuff that meant I couldn't afford delays. I'd picked up in Sioux Falls around 6 p.m., and the delivery window in Omaha opened at 4 a.m. Plenty of time, even accounting for the usual slowdowns and the occasional construction zone that always seemed to pop up on night runs. Except there isn't a border inspection point between South Dakota and Nebraska. There never has been. I want to make that clear right now, before I go any further. I've driven this route maybe 400 times. I know every truck stop, every rest area, every place where the shoulder's wide enough to pull off if you blow a tire. There is no checkpoint at mile marker 891. But that night, there was. The weather had been clear when I left Sioux Falls. Temperature dropping fast the way it does in early fall on the plains. That particular kind of cold that seeps through the cab even when you've got the heat running. I remember that specifically because I just adjusted the thermostat for the third time when I saw the lights ahead. At first, I thought it was an accident. The way the lights were arranged, bright white pools that seemed to float in the darkness, reminded me of emergency vehicles. But as I got closer, slowing down instinctively the way you do when you see flashing lights, I realized it wasn't an accident scene. It was a structure, something permanent. Mile marker 891, right where the state line should be. But instead of the usual signage, those big green interstate signs that welcome you to Nebraska and remind you to buckle up, there were floodlights, industrial-grade illumination that made the darkness around them seem absolute, like they were creating their own pocket of reality. I eased off the throttle, squinting against the glare. My foot hovered over the brake. Something in my gut was telling me this was wrong, but I couldn't articulate what it was. Just a feeling. The kind of instinct you develop after years on the road, when you learn to read situations before your conscious mind catches up. There was a structure spanning both lanes, something like a toll plaza but heavier, more permanent. Concrete barriers, the kind they use in war zones, funneled traffic into 3 lanes. Each one was topped with overhead lighting that reminded me of prison yards. Not that I've been in one, but you see enough movies. You know what I mean, the thing that made my stomach tighten, made my hands grip the steering wheel harder than necessary, was simple. I'd driven this exact stretch of highway maybe 400 times. I knew every exit, every mile marker, every place where the shoulder widened enough to pull off if you had a problem. I knew where the deer liked to cross in the fall. I knew which overpasses the state troopers used for speed traps. I knew this road better than I knew the streets in my own neighborhood. There was nothing here. There had never been anything here. My CB radio crackled, breaking the silence. I'd had it on scan, not really listening, just the background static that keeps you company on long hauls. The white noise that makes you feel less alone when you're the only vehicle on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere. Now it locked onto a frequency and a voice came through. Southbound commercial vehicle approaching checkpoint. Reduce speed to 15 miles per hour and select your lane. The voice was professional, neutral, the kind of flat effect you get from people who say the same thing 500 times a shift. Border Patrol agents, TSA screeners, Anyone whose job involves processing an endless stream of people who all look the same after a while. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. I hadn't keyed my mic, hadn't identified myself on any channel, hadn't announced my position or my direction or anything. The only way they could know I was southbound was if they could see me, and the only way they could know I was commercial was if they had my information already. But I hadn't passed any readers, any scanners, any of the usual infrastructure that tracks trucks on the interstate. I looked up at the gantry as I rolled closer, bringing my speed down to 20, then 15. There were cameras up there, lots of them, and something else that might have been license plate readers. The kind with infrared capability that can pick up your tags even in complete darkness. Standard equipment for toll plazas, sure. But this wasn't a toll plaza, and we were in the middle of nowhere. No toll roads out here, just open interstate. Paid for by federal and state taxes, free to use for anyone with a valid license. The lanes were marked with painted arrows, bright yellow against dark asphalt. The left one said passenger vehicles. The middle said commercial, expedited. The right said secondary inspection. I'd been through enough actual checkpoints, the real ones at the Canadian border, the agricultural inspections in California, the way stations that dot every major corridor, to know you don't choose secondary inspection voluntarily. That's where they send you when something's wrong with your paperwork, or they don't like the look of you, or their scanner picks up an anomaly in your load. Secondary inspection means delays, questions, sometimes a full search of your trailer that can take hours. I aimed for the middle lane, expedited, get through quick, get back on the road, make my delivery window. As I rolled under the gantry, I noticed something else about the lights. They weren't pointed at the road. They were angled down, focused on where the driver would be sitting, pointed at the cab. I felt exposed, like being on stage, like every movement I made was being recorded and analyzed. I couldn't see past the glare to whatever was on the other side. The barrier arm ahead of me was down, yellow and black stripes, just like a railroad crossing. A small booth stood to the right, its windows dark except for the blue glow of computer screens. That particular shade of blue you only see from monitors, harsh and artificial. I put the truck in neutral and set the brake, killed the engine. The sudden silence was wrong. Out here on the plains there's always wind. Always. Even on calm nights you hear it moving across the grass, rustling through the wheat fields. A low whisper that never quite stops. It's the soundtrack of the prairie, constant and eternal. But now there was nothing. Just the tick of my engine cooling and a low electrical hum from the lights overhead. That and my own breathing, which sounded too loud in the stillness. My logbook was current. I checked it before leaving Sioux Falls, made sure all my hours were logged correctly, that I had enough drive time left to make Omaha with room to spare. My medical card was valid. I'd renewed it just 2 months ago, passed the physical with no issues. The bill of lading was clean, every item accounted for, every seal verified. I had nothing to worry about. I kept telling myself that as I waited. Nothing to worry about. Just a routine inspection. Probably some new security measure I hadn't heard about. Maybe they were testing new equipment, new procedures. It happens sometimes. The bureaucracy of commercial transportation was always adding new layers, new regulations, new hoops to jump through. But I'd never heard of a checkpoint appearing overnight. And I would have heard. Truckers talk. The CB is always alive with information about new way stations, new enforcement zones, new speed traps. If there was a checkpoint here, someone would have mentioned it. The booth door opened. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against the blue light. As he approached, I could make out more details. He wore a uniform, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the artificial light, with patches on the shoulders that I couldn't quite read. Not police, not border patrol, not DOT. Something else. His face was obscured by the brim of his cap and the angle of the overhead lights, which seemed deliberately positioned to keep him in shadow while illuminating me. He stopped next to my door and looked up. I still couldn't see his eyes, just the lower half of his face, clean-shaven. No expression. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. Just blank. Professional blank. "Documentation," he said. Not a question, not a request with a please attached. Just a flat statement. An expectation. I grabbed my folder from the passenger seat and rolled down the window. The air that came in was cold, much colder than it should have been. The temperature had been dropping, sure, but this was different. This was the kind of cold you feel in your bones, the kind that makes you think of winter even though it was only mid-October. My breath fogged in the air between us. "Evening," I said, trying to sound casual, trying to sound like this was normal. Like I went through random checkpoints that appeared out of nowhere all the time. "I've run this route a lot. Don't think I've seen this checkpoint before." He took the folder without responding. Didn't acknowledge my comment, didn't react to it at all. Just flipped through the papers with movements that seemed almost mechanical. Precise. Too precise. I watched his hands. They were pale, and his fingers moved with that kind of economy you see in people who've done the same motion thousands of times. But there was something off about the way he handled the documents, like he wasn't really looking at them, like he was just going through the motions. "Where did you load?" he asked. His voice was the same as on the CB. Flat, neutral, no inflection. "Sioux Falls, about 3 hours ago. Destination? Omaha. Medical supply warehouse off 680. He nodded slowly, still not looking at me. His eyes, what I could see of them under the brim, were focused on the papers, but they weren't moving the way eyes should when you're reading. They were fixed, staring at one point. Then he closed the folder and held it against his chest. "Do you know what date it is?" The question caught me off guard, threw me. It was such a strange thing to ask. "It's October 15th. "Are you certain?" That word, certain. It hung in the cold air between us. "Yeah, I'm certain. Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked back to the booth. The door closed behind him with a sound that seemed too final, too heavy, and I was alone again under those lights. I checked my phone. October 15th, 11:47 p.m. I took a screenshot. I don't know why. Some instinct told me I'd want proof later. Proof that this was real, that it was happening. The screen glowed in the darkness of the cab, the only warm light in a world of harsh white fluorescence. The wait stretched. 5 minutes became 10. I started doing that thing where you count seconds in your head, trying to match them to the passage of actual time. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. But I kept losing count, getting distracted by the silence, by the wrongness of it all. I thought about keying up the CB, asking if any other drivers were seeing this. But something stopped me. Some instinct that said drawing attention to myself right now would be a mistake. And besides, the frequency was silent. Completely dead. On I-29 at midnight on a Friday, there should have been chatter. Truckers swapping information about traffic, weather, where the cops were running radar. Stories, jokes, complaints about dispatch. The usual background noise of the profession. But there was nothing. Like I was the only person left in the world. At 15 minutes, I started to get angry. This was costing me time, and time was money I couldn't afford to lose. Every minute sitting here was a minute I wasn't making progress toward Omaha, wasn't getting closer to that delivery window, and if I missed the window, I'd have to wait for the next one, which meant lost income, which meant explaining to Natalie why the mortgage payment would be late again. I reached for the door handle, ready to go knock on that booth and ask what the holdup was. Maybe light a fire under whoever was in there. Demand some answers. That's when I saw the other truck. It was behind me, maybe 50 yards back, sitting in the same middle lane. Freightliner, older model, the kind with the classic long nose. It was running with just its parking lights on, small orange dots in the darkness. I hadn't heard it approach, hadn't seen it in my mirrors. It was just there, as if it had materialized from the darkness itself. I stared at it in my side mirror. The cab was dark. I couldn't tell if anyone was inside, couldn't see any movement, any sign of life. Just the truck, sitting there, engine running based on the faint shimmer of exhaust in the cold air. I watched it for a full minute, waiting for something to happen, for the driver to climb down, for lights to come on, for any indication that there was a human being in there. But nothing moved. It just sat there, perfectly still, like a photograph. The booth door opened again. The officer emerged, but this time he wasn't alone. There was a second figure, taller, wearing the same dark uniform. They approached my truck together, moving in step like soldiers, perfectly synchronized. The first one still had my folder. "Step out of the vehicle, please," he said. "Is there a problem?" "Step out of the vehicle." Not a request, an order. Delivered in that same flat tone that somehow managed to be more threatening than if he'd been aggressive about it. I've been pulled into secondary inspections before. It's part of the job. Sometimes they're random, sometimes they're targeted based on your cargo or your route or just the inspector's intuition. Usually they're looking for logbook violations, checking your cargo against your manifest, making sure you're not running overweight or carrying something you shouldn't. It's annoying but routine. You comply, you wait, you get cleared, you move on. But this didn't feel routine. This felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I climbed down from the cab. My boots hit the concrete, and the sound echoed wrong. Too much reverb, like we were in a space much larger than an open highway, like we were inside something. The second officer moved to the passenger side of my truck without a word, his footsteps perfectly silent. "I'm going to need you to open your trailer," the first officer said. "Sure. Can I ask what you're looking for?" He didn't answer, just waited, his face still in shadow while I walked to the back of the trailer. My hands were shaking as I worked the lock. Not from fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when something fundamental about the world has shifted and you haven't quite processed it yet. Like waking up and finding your furniture rearranged and not remembering doing it. The doors swung open with their usual metallic groan. The interior lights of the trailer flickered on automatically, illuminating rows of sealed pharmaceutical containers. White boxes, neatly stacked, each one labeled with lot numbers and handling instructions. Everything exactly as it should be. Everything perfectly normal. The officer stepped past me and climbed up into the trailer. I heard his footsteps moving around inside, the sound of cardboard being shifted, plastic being moved. Methodical. Thorough. The second officer appeared at my elbow, and I jumped. I hadn't heard him approach. "How long have you been driving this route?" he asked. His voice was different from the first one. Older, raspier, like he'd spent too many years smoking too many cigarettes. 11 years. "And you don't remember this checkpoint?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with absolute certainty, like he already knew the answer. "No. There's never been a checkpoint here." "Are you certain?" That word again. Certain. The way he said it made it sound like a challenge, like he was daring me to trust my own memory. "I'm certain," I said. But even as I said it, I felt a flicker of doubt. Because how could I be certain? Memory is unreliable. Everyone knows that. We misremember things all the time, fill in gaps with assumptions, create false memories that feel as real as genuine ones. But no, I knew this road. I'd driven it hundreds of times. Hadn't I? He turned his head to look at me, and for the first time I saw his face clearly. He was older, maybe 60, with deep lines around his mouth and eyes. A face weathered by years of outdoor work, sun and wind and cold. But his eyes were wrong. Too focused, too intense, like he was looking through me rather than at me. Like he was seeing something I couldn't. "Memory is unreliable," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "Especially at night. Especially when you're tired." I'm not tired. Everyone's tired. The first officer climbed out of the trailer, brushing off his hands even though there was nothing on them. "Seal is intact," he said to his partner. Then to me, "You can close it." I swung the doors shut and reset the lock with hands that had stopped shaking, replaced by something else. A cold certainty that something was very wrong here, that I was caught in something I didn't understand. When I turned around, both officers were standing between me and my cab, blocking my path. "We need you to come inside for processing," the first one said. "Processing? For what? You just checked my load. Everything's clean." "Standard procedure for this checkpoint." "There is no standard procedure because there is no checkpoint. This place doesn't exist." The words came out harder than I intended, with more force. Anger creeping into my voice. The second officer's expression didn't change. Just that same intense stare, those eyes that saw too much. "And yet," he said quietly, "here you are." I looked past them at my truck. The Freightliner was still sitting back there in the darkness. As I watched, its headlights flicked on, then off again. Once, twice, like a signal, like communication. "I have a delivery window," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying to sound reasonable. "I need to get moving. I can't afford delays." "This won't take long," the first officer said. "Just need to verify some information." "What information? You have my documentation. Everything's in order." Nevertheless, they weren't giving me a choice. I could see that in their stance, in the way they'd positioned themselves. And fighting with them, whoever they were, would only make things worse, would only create problems I didn't need. So I followed them to the booth, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get back in my truck and crash through that barrier if I had to. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part that had spent 11 years following rules, being compliant, being the kind of driver who doesn't cause problems, that part made me walk through that door. That was my first mistake. The interior of the booth was larger than it should have been. From outside, it had looked like a standard security checkpoint structure, maybe 10 by 12 feet. Just big enough for a desk, some equipment, maybe a small break area. But inside it stretched back into a corridor lined with doors. 10, maybe 12 of them, all identical, all closed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that sickly green-white glow that makes everyone look corpse-like. The first officer gestured to a plastic chair next to a desk. "Have a seat." I sat. The chair was uncomfortable, too small, the kind you find in elementary schools or DMV waiting rooms, designed to make you feel like a child. My knees hit the edge of the desk, and I had to shift to get comfortable. The second officer had disappeared somewhere down the corridor. I could hear doors opening and closing, the murmur of voices I couldn't quite make out. Were there other drivers being processed? Other people who'd been pulled in? The first officer settled in behind the desk and opened my folder. He spread the documents out in a precise pattern, arranging them like tarot cards. My CDL in the upper left, my medical card next to it, the bill of lading below, my registration and insurance forming a second row, everything laid out just so, each document perfectly aligned with the others. Name, he said, looking at the papers rather than at me. It's right there on my license. I need you to state it verbally. Mason Briggs. He wrote something on a form I couldn't see, his pen scratching loudly in the quiet. The sound seemed amplified somehow, like we were in a larger space than we actually were. Date of birth, March 7th, 1982. Current address. I gave it to him. He wrote it down, his handwriting small and precise. Then, without looking up, he asked me to repeat it. I did. He wrote it down again, in a different spot on the form. The same information, twice, on what appeared to be the same document. A coldness was spreading through my chest. Not fear exactly, something else. The feeling you get when you realize you've made a terrible mistake, but it's too late to fix it. How long have you been driving commercially? 11 years. I told you that outside. Have you ever been stopped at this checkpoint before? No, this checkpoint doesn't. I caught myself. Stopped before I said it again. Because arguing wasn't getting me anywhere. No. Are you certain? There it was again. That word. Lobbed at me like a weapon. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. Yes, I'm certain. He made a mark on his form. A small check mark, like I'd passed some kind of test, or failed it. I couldn't tell which. In the past 6 months, have you crossed this border point? What border? This is the state line between South Dakota and Nebraska. There's no border here. There's no customs, no immigration, nothing that requires a checkpoint. It's just a state line. Answer the question, please. I drive this route twice a week, sometimes more. I've crossed this state line hundreds of times, but there's never been a checkpoint here. This is new. This appeared tonight. He didn't respond to that. Just made another mark on his form. I was starting to understand the pattern. Every time I insisted that the checkpoint shouldn't exist, every time I challenged the premise of what was happening, he made a note. Building a record of my what? My instability? My unreliability? Have you experienced any unusual symptoms while driving tonight? He asked. Dizziness, confusion, time distortion. The question made my skin crawl, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. No, I'm fine. Headaches? Visual disturbances? No. Memory gaps? What? No. Why are you asking me this? He finally looked up at me, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. In the fluorescent light, his skin looked waxy, artificial, like a mannequin's, like something trying very hard to look human, but not quite managing it. His eyes were dark, pupils dilated so far they'd almost consumed the iris. Just standard questions, he said. For the processing. Processing for what? What is this place? This is a checkpoint for your passage. My passage to where? Nebraska? I'm just crossing a state line. This doesn't make sense. Nevertheless. That word, nevertheless. Like an answer that wasn't an answer. Like a wall I kept running into. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Look, I don't know what this is, but I have a schedule to keep. You've checked my documents, you've checked my load. Everything's in order. I need to get back on the road. Sit down, please. I've been cooperative, but this is taking too long, unless you're detaining me for a specific violation. The second officer appeared in the doorway behind me. I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't heard footsteps or doors opening. He was just there, filling the doorway with his presence. Sit down, he repeated. Not a request. I sat, The first officer produced a new form, this one on yellow paper. Bright yellow, the color of caution tape or hazard signs. He slid it across the desk toward me. I need you to read this and sign at the bottom. What is it? Acknowledgement of passage. I'm not signing anything until I read it. Of course, take your time. I pulled the paper closer. The text was dense, printed in a font so small I had to squint to make it out. Legal boilerplate, the kind of thing you see on rental agreements and liability waivers. Terms like voluntary consent and acknowledgement of procedures and waiver of claims. Standard bureaucratic garbage, the kind you sign without reading a dozen times a year because life's too short to parse every piece of fine print. But one paragraph caught my eye, about 2/3 of the way down. By signing below, I acknowledge that I have been informed of the nature of this checkpoint and agree that any discrepancies in my recollection of this location are due to personal error rather than external factors. I further acknowledge that my memory may be unreliable and that official records should be considered more accurate than personal recollection. I read it twice, 3 times, making sure I understood what it was saying. They wanted me to sign a form stating that I was wrong, that my memory was faulty, that if I thought this checkpoint didn't exist, that was my problem, my mistake, my failure of perception. What does this mean? I asked, pointing at the paragraph. It means, if you thought you remembered something different about this location, that's your mistake, not ours. But there wasn't anything here. This checkpoint didn't exist yesterday. It didn't exist this morning. I've driven this route for 11 years, and there has never been a checkpoint at mile marker 891. Are you certain? I wanted to scream. Wanted to grab that form and rip it to shreds. Wanted to flip the desk and run for the door, but I didn't. Because I needed to get through this. Needed to get back on the road, make my delivery, keep my job, keep my life moving forward instead of getting stuck in this fluorescent nightmare. If I refuse to sign, I asked. The first officer folded his hands on the desk. Then we'll have to hold you for extended processing. Could take several hours, possibly longer. We'd need to verify your documentation more thoroughly. Inspect your load more carefully. Check for discrepancies. And if I sign, you'll be cleared for passage immediately. It was blackmail, simple and direct. Sign their form saying I was crazy, that my memory was wrong, that I couldn't trust my own perceptions. Or sit here for hours, missing my delivery window, losing money I couldn't afford to lose, while they found reasons to keep me here. I grabbed the pen. My hand was shaking again, but I steadied it enough to scrawl my signature at the bottom of that yellow form. Mason Briggs, in handwriting that looked like someone else's. Someone defeated. Someone who'd given up. The first officer smiled for the first time. It didn't reach his eyes. Those stayed dark and empty, like windows into nothing. Thank you for your cooperation. He gathered up the yellow form and my other documents with that same mechanical precision, slid them back into the folder, and handed it to me. You're free to go. I stood up so fast the chair tipped backward, clattered against the floor with a sound that echoed too loudly. I didn't pick it up. Just walked out of that booth, down the corridor that seemed shorter now, past those closed doors that I'd never seen opened, back into the cold night air. The barrier arm was up. My truck sat waiting right where I'd left it. Engine still ticking as it cooled, a familiar sound that grounded me back in reality. The Freightliner behind me was gone. Just empty pavement. No trace that it had ever been there. I climbed into my cab, hands still shaking. Fired up the engine. The familiar diesel rumble felt like coming home, like something real and solid in a world that had gone liquid and strange. I put it in gear and rolled forward through the checkpoint, past the gantry with its watching cameras, past the booth where I'd signed away my certainty. In my side mirror, I watched the lights recede. The structure, the booths, the barriers, all of it shrinking into the distance, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a glow on the horizon, then a faint shimmer, then nothing. I wanted to floor it, put as many miles between me and that place as possible. But something made me look at my clock first. It read 11:52 p.m. I stared at it, blinked, looked again. I'd been in that checkpoint for what felt like 30 minutes, maybe more. The interview, the questions, reading that form, signing it. All of that had taken time, real, measurable time. But only 5 minutes had elapsed on my clock. I grabbed my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, found the screenshot I'd taken earlier. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., and the current time, displayed at the top of my screen, 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes. I'd parked the truck, climbed down, walked to the trailer, opened it for inspection, walked to the booth, sat through that entire interview. Read that form carefully, every word, signed it, all in 5 minutes. That wasn't possible. It took longer than 5 minutes just to walk from my truck to the booth and back. The processing alone should have taken 15, 20 minutes minimum. But my clock, my phone, they both agreed. 5 minutes. That's all. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I brought the truck up to highway speed, watching the speedometer climb. 50, 60, 65. The road ahead was empty, lit only by my headlights cutting through the darkness. Normal, everything normal. Just the I-29 corridor running south through the night like it had for decades. I tried the CB, hands fumbling with the mic. "This is southbound on I-29, mile marker 895. Anybody out there?" Static hissed through the speaker. Then, after a long moment that felt like forever, "Yeah, I got you. This is northbound. Just crossed into South Dakota. You need something?" A real voice, a real person. I nearly cried with relief. Did you see a checkpoint back there, at the state line?" A pause. I could hear highway noise in the background, the familiar rumble of tires on pavement. Normal sounds, real sounds. "Checkpoint? No, man, just the regular signs. Why, something wrong?" No, just thought I saw something. Never mind." "You sound shook up. You okay to drive?" Yeah, I'm fine, thanks." I let the mic drop into my lap, stared at the road ahead, at the broken white lines that rushed toward me and disappeared beneath my hood. Over and over. Hypnotic. Endless. My phone buzzed. A text from dispatch. ETA Omaha. I typed back with thumbs that didn't want to cooperate. On schedule, arrival 0400. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. I was just tired, working too many hours. My mind playing tricks because I was pushing too hard, not sleeping enough, running myself ragged to make ends meet. Except I wasn't tired. Not even a little. I was wide awake, every nerve firing, my heart rate elevated like I'd been running. Adrenaline still flooding my system, making my hands shake and my thoughts race. And I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see those lights appear behind me. Expecting the checkpoint to somehow follow me down the highway, to reappear ahead of me, to trap me in a loop I couldn't escape. At mile marker 900, I passed a rest area. 2 trucks were parked there, running lights on. A Peterbilt and a Kenworth, sitting side by side like old friends. Normal. Real. I could see movement in one of the cabs, probably a driver settling in for a nap or checking his logbook. I thought about pulling in, taking a break, trying to process what had just happened to make sense of it, but if I stopped, I'd have to think about it. Really think about it. Confront the fact that I'd just spent 30 minutes in a place that had taken 5 minutes to pass through. That I'd signed a form admitting I was wrong about my own memory. That somewhere on I-29, between South Dakota and Nebraska, there was a checkpoint that shouldn't exist. And underneath that, pushing at the edges of my consciousness like something trying to surface, was another thought. I'd been through it before. I knew I had, even though I couldn't remember it. Even though it was impossible. Somewhere in the back of my mind, buried under layers of false certainty and convenient forgetting, there was a memory of other nights, other stops. Other times I'd sat in that plastic chair while an officer asked me if I was certain. How many times had I signed that form? How many times had I forgotten? The thought made me nauseous, made my vision blur at the edges. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, forced myself to focus on the road, on the simple mechanical task of keeping my truck between the lines. I made it to Omaha at 3:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, which should have been impossible given the delay at the checkpoint. But there it was on my ELD. Continuous driving from Sioux Falls to Omaha, 7 hours and 10 minutes, no stops. No checkpoint, no 30 minutes of lost time. According to every device I owned, it had never happened. The warehouse receiving dock was already open when I arrived, lights blazing in the pre-dawn darkness. I backed up to Bay 6, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment. Just sat, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. They'd finally stopped shaking. The dock supervisor came out with his clipboard. Terry, a guy I'd dealt with maybe a dozen times over the years. Good guy, professional. He gave me the usual nod, barely awake himself, running on coffee and muscle memory like most of us at this hour. Briggs, right on time as always. Yeah. He noticed something in my voice, frowned slightly. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The choice of words made me flinch. Just long night. Didn't sleep well before the run. He grunted, already looking at his paperwork. Tell me about it. Been up since midnight dealing with a delayed shipment from Denver. Let's get you unloaded. Seal number? I gave it to him. He compared it to his documents, nodded, and waved over the forklift operator. Probably want to grab some rest before you head back. There's coffee in the break room if you want it. Yeah, thanks. But I didn't go to the break room. As soon as my trailer was empty and I'd signed the delivery confirmation, I pulled out my phone and opened Google Maps. My hands were steady now, but my heart was racing again as I zoomed in on I-29. The section between Sioux Falls and Omaha. I scrolled slowly along the route, looking for any indication of an inspection station or checkpoint. Any official marker, any structure, anything that would explain what I'd seen. Nothing. Just mile markers and exit numbers and the small towns that dotted the corridor. Elk Point, Jefferson, Homer, the usual landmarks. I switched to satellite view. The images loaded slowly on the warehouse Wi-Fi, pixelating and resolving. I zoomed in close enough to make out individual buildings, individual vehicles parked along the shoulder. Traced the highway inch by inch through that section where the checkpoint had been. Mile marker 891. Right at the state line. Just road. Asphalt and grass and nothing else. No structures. No gantries. No concrete barriers. The satellite image was dated August 2016, over a year old, but there was nothing there, just empty highway running through empty prairie. I tried Street View next, clicking through the available images. The interface showed multiple dates, 2015, 2040, 2030, going back years. I checked each one methodically, looking for any change, any indication that something had been built there at some point. Every image showed the same thing: empty highway, grassland on either side, the occasional fence line marking property boundaries. No checkpoint, no toll plaza. Nothing that matched what I'd driven through just a few hours ago. "Hey, Briggs?" I looked up, startled. Terry was standing next to my truck again, fresh coffee cup in hand. Steam rose from it in the cold morning air. "Dock's clear if you need to stage somewhere before your next load. Dispatch got anything lined up for you?" "Not yet." "Terry, can I ask you something?" "Sure. You ever heard of a checkpoint on I-29 between here and Sioux Falls?" He frowned, thinking. Took a sip of his coffee. "Checkpoint? You mean like way stations? There's a few of those, but they're not always operating." "No, more like a border inspection. Permanent structure. Lights, officers checking documentation. The whole 9 yards." He shook his head slowly. "On I-29? Man, that's all domestic. No borders to inspect. You might be thinking of the Canadian crossings up north. I-29 goes all the way to the border eventually." "No, I mean, right at the state line, South Dakota to Nebraska." "There's nothing there, Briggs, just signs. Welcome to Nebraska, that kind of thing." He studied me for a moment, concern creeping into his expression. "You sure you're okay? You really do look rough. Maybe you should get some sleep before you drive anywhere." "Yeah, maybe you're right." After he left, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, the satellite images, the street view, all of it showing nothing, showing that the checkpoint didn't exist and never had. I pulled up the screenshot I'd taken while sitting at the checkpoint. The timestamp was clear. 11:47 p.m., October 15th. But when I looked at the actual image, something was wrong. The screen showed my normal GPS interface, the route highlighted in blue from Sioux Falls to Omaha, a straight line down I-29. But there was no checkpoint marked, no deviation from the normal path, no alert or warning or any indication that there was anything unusual ahead. If the checkpoint existed, it should have shown up on my GPS. The system was linked to traffic data, to construction alerts, to law enforcement notifications. It should have alerted me to slow down, to prepare for an inspection, should have rerouted me if possible. But the GPS had shown nothing, because there was nothing there. Except there was. I'd seen it, I'd been through it. I had the memory of sitting in that booth, of reading that yellow form, of signing my name at the bottom. The memory was clear, detailed, specific, not dreamlike or fuzzy or uncertain, as real as any other memory I had. I opened my logbook app next. The ELD in my truck automatically tracked everything: my movement, my stops, my hours of service. If I'd stopped at that checkpoint for even 5 minutes, let alone 30, it would show up in the data. That's what the system was designed for, to create an unalterable record of exactly where I was and when. I scrolled to last night's entry. The data was simple, straightforward. Departed Sioux Falls at 20:37. Arrived Omaha at 03:47. 7 hours, 10 minutes, continuous driving. No stops recorded. No stop at mile marker 891. No 30 minutes in processing. No 5-minute pause while I sat in my truck waiting for the barrier to lift. According to my ELD, I'd driven straight through without slowing down. I grabbed my paper logbook from the glove box, the backup that most drivers don't bother with anymore, but I'd kept out of habit. Old school, my dad had driven truck, and he'd always kept paper records in addition to whatever electronic system the company required. Electronics fail, he used to say. Paper lasts. I flipped to yesterday's page. My own handwriting, the entries I'd made at the beginning and end of the trip. Departed Sioux Falls 2037. Arrived Omaha 0347. Nothing about a checkpoint, no note in the margin, no mention of any delay or stop or inspection. But I could have sworn I'd written something. I had a memory, faint, uncertain, of making a note. Inspection at State Line, 2347. I could see it in my mind, see my own handwriting forming those words. The page was blank except for my normal entries. No note. No mention of any stop. I was losing my mind. That was the simplest explanation. The one that made the most sense. Stress, fatigue, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning from a leak somewhere in the cab's ventilation system. My brain was manufacturing memories, creating detailed false experiences that felt real but weren't. Except for one thing. I reached into my folder and pulled out my documents. CDL, medical card, insurance, registration. Everything was there exactly as it should be. The officer had looked at all of them, spread them out on his desk in that precise pattern. But one paper was missing. The bill of lading for the load I'd just delivered. The one that should have been right there in my folder. The one the officer had examined during the processing. It wasn't there. I checked the glove box, the side pockets, under the seat. Everywhere I might have absent-mindedly put it. Nothing. I called dispatch, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, this is Briggs. Just delivered in Omaha, but I can't find my bill of lading. Did I maybe leave it at the warehouse?" Keyboard clicking in the background. Hold on. More clicking. "No, it's all electronic anyway. The delivery confirmation went through on your end. You don't need the hard copy. Why?" "Just trying to keep my files organized." "Well, you delivered on time and the load's confirmed, so you're good. Nice work. You heading back empty, or you want another run?" I'll take another run. Keep me busy." Attaboy. Let me see what I got. How about a load from Des Moines to Sioux Falls? Picks up at noon. My stomach dropped. Sioux Falls. That meant driving north on I-29, past that section again, past mile marker 891. "Actually, you got anything else? Different route, maybe?" "What's wrong with I-29? You love that corridor." "Just looking to change things up, you know." "Briggs, you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine, just tired." "All right, well, I got a load from Kansas City to Minneapolis. Takes you up I-35 instead. That work better?" "Yeah, perfect, thanks." I-35, a different route. I could avoid that section of highway, at least for now. Give myself time to figure out what was happening. Or to forget about it. To let it fade like a dream, which is what it probably was anyway. But for the next 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights. That gantry, that booth with its fluorescent glow. The officer's face, waxy, and wrong in the artificial light. The yellow form with its dense text, and that one paragraph about memory being unreliable. I started researching. Late nights in truck stop parking lots. Sitting in my cab with my laptop, searching for anything similar. Phantom checkpoints. Missing time on highways. Unexplained border inspections. Time lost while driving. I found nothing credible, or rather, I found too much. Conspiracy theories about government experiments in time manipulation. Alien abduction stories featuring missing time and implanted memories. Creepypasta fiction about phantom toll booths and ghost inspectors. Nothing real. Nothing that matched what I'd experienced. But then, on the third night, I found something. A forum. Small, obscure, barely maintained. The kind of place that looked like it had been abandoned years ago, but it was still technically online, still accessible if you knew where to look. The forum was for truckers, long-haul drivers sharing stories, advice, warnings about bad routes or dishonest dispatchers. Most of it was mundane. But there was one section, buried deep in the archives, labeled Unexplained Incidents. I clicked through, found threads about strange experiences on the road. Most of them were the usual stories you hear in every truck stop. Ghost hitchhikers vanishing from the passenger seat. Phantom cars that disappear when you try to pass them. The woman in white on Highway 606. Standard folklore. But one thread caught my attention. The title was simple, direct. Anyone else lose time on I-29? The original post was from September 2015, over 2 years ago. This is going to sound crazy, but I swear I lost about 30 minutes on my last run through SDNE. Left Sioux Falls at 8 p.m., should have hit Omaha around 3 a.m. based on my usual pace, but I arrived at 3:30 even though my dashboard clock said 3 o'clock. Can't explain it. ELD shows no stops. Can't remember anything unusual about the drive. But I lost 30 minutes somewhere. Anyone else experience anything like this? There were 3 replies. First one, from a user called Road Warrior 88. Check your ELD settings, man. Probably just a GPS glitch or time zone issue. Happens sometimes. Second one, from Mileage King. You probably just forgot about a rest stop or something. Easy to zone out on long hauls. Third one, from a user with no profile picture and no other posts. I know exactly what you're talking about. It happened to me too. Do you remember a checkpoint? I stared at that third reply. Read it again. The username was just a string of numbers. User 8471947. I clicked on the profile. Last active, October 2015. No other posts anywhere on the forum. No information. Just that one reply, then nothing. The original poster had responded, "Checkpoint? What checkpoint? There's no checkpoint on I-29. And user 8471947 had replied one more time. Not officially, but it's there. Mile marker 891. Some people see it, most don't. If you saw it, if you went through it, we need to talk. Check your documents, see if anything's missing." That was the last post in the thread. It was dated October 17th, 2015, over 2 years ago. I sat there in my truck, laptop balanced on my steering wheel, staring at those words. Check your documents, see if anything's missing. My bill of lading, the one piece of paper I couldn't find. I sent a private message to user 8471947, even though the account had been inactive for 2 years. Even though I didn't expect a response. But I had to try. My name is Mason Briggs. I drove through the checkpoint 3 days ago, at mile marker 891. You're right, my bill of lading is missing. I need to know what this is. Please respond if you get this. I didn't expect anything. The account was dead, abandoned. But 3 days later, while I was parked at a rest stop outside of Minneapolis, I got a notification. User 8471947 had replied. The message was brief, written in the kind of terse style you develop when you're not sure who might be reading. You've been through it too, the checkpoint at marker 891. I've talked to 4 other drivers who remember it. We all signed the yellow form. We all lost time, 30 minutes that our clocks say never happened. And we all started noticing things afterward. Inconsistencies, the empty truck that follows, the repeating numbers, the feeling that we've been through it before more than once, but we can't quite remember. It's like once you really notice it, once you don't forget this time, you can't stop noticing it. The pattern becomes visible. I'm attaching a photo. Tell me if this looks familiar. My hands were shaking as I downloaded the attachment. The image loaded slowly on my phone. A scanned copy of a yellow form. The same acknowledgement of passage I'd signed. The same dense legal text. But this one was different. At the bottom, where a single signature should be, there were dozens of names. Layered on top of each other, written in different hands, different inks, like the form had been signed over and over again in the exact same spot. A palimpsest of signatures, each one bleeding into the others until they formed a dark smudge. I zoomed in, trying to make out individual names. I could read a few: James Nolan, 10/15/2017, Sarah Mitchell, 10/15/2016, Marcus Webb, 10/15/2015, Derek Hayes, 10/15/2014. All dated October 15th, different years, but the same date. And at the very top of the pile, barely visible under all the others, written in handwriting that looked like mine, Mason Briggs, 10/15/2013. My vision blurred. The date swam in front of my eyes. 2013. 4 years ago. But I didn't remember. I didn't remember going through that checkpoint 4 years ago. Didn't remember signing that form. Didn't remember any of it. Except, maybe I did. Maybe that's why the checkpoint felt familiar. Why some part of me recognized those fluorescent lights, that plastic chair, that officer's waxy face. Because I'd been through it before and I'd forgotten. Just like I was supposed to. Just like I would forget again, if I let myself. I replied with shaking fingers, "How is this possible? What is that place?" The response came quickly, like he'd been waiting by his computer. "I don't know what it is, but I know what it does. It's a filter, a sorting mechanism. Some people go through and forget completely. Their names don't stick on the form. Some people remember for a day or two but convince themselves it was a dream. Their signatures fade. And some people, like us, can't forget. Not completely. We get stuck in the loop. Every time we pass through that section of highway, there's a chance it'll appear again. And each time it gets harder to leave. The processing takes longer. The questions get more specific. And eventually, I've been through it 11 times. That I can remember. Could be more. The form keeps track, I think. All those signatures, that's how many times we've been processed. How many times we've agreed that our memory is wrong, that official records are more reliable than what we actually experienced. What happens if you don't sign? I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. I sent another message. "Are you there?" No response. I checked the forum. The user's profile was still there, but when I tried to access it, I got an error message. Then the error cleared, and the profile was gone. Not just inactive, completely removed from the system, like it had never existed. The thread about lost time on I-29 was gone too. When I searched for it, I got no results. Even the URL I'd used to access it just led to a 404 error, but I still had the photo. I'd downloaded it before everything disappeared. I zoomed in again, studying each signature, counting them carefully. 47 names. 47 times someone had sat in that plastic chair and signed away their certainty. Acknowledged that their memory was unreliable. Agreed that the official version of reality was more accurate than their own experience. I thought about that empty freightliner I'd seen. About James Nolan's name on the form I'd found inside it, dated 2017. Wondered if he was still out there somewhere, still driving that loop. Still being processed, or if something else had happened to him. Wondered how many of those 47 names were still breathing, still driving, still signing. 2 weeks later, dispatch called with a load. Sioux Falls to Omaha. High-priority pharmaceuticals, same as before. Good money. The route I'd been avoiding. "I can't take that one," I said automatically. "Mason, you've been turning down I-29 runs for 3 months now. I need a reason that makes sense. You got beef with South Dakota? Kansas? What's going on?" I almost told him, almost said, "There's a checkpoint that appears and disappears, and every time I go through it, I lose time and sign a form admitting I'm crazy." But I didn't, because that would sound insane, because I'd lose my job, because I couldn't prove any of it. "Just prefer other routes these days," I said. "Well, I don't have other routes. This is what's available. You want it or not?" I needed the money. Natalie and I were behind on the mortgage again. My refusal of so many runs had taken a serious bite out of our income, and we were starting to get warning letters from the bank. One more trip through. Just one more. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Or maybe I'd see it again, and this time I wouldn't sign. This time I'd refuse, no matter what they threatened. This time I'd break the loop. "I'll take it," I said. I picked up the load on a Wednesday afternoon. Refrigerated pharmaceuticals again. Strawberries this time, headed for a grocery distribution center. I timed it carefully, planning my route so I'd hit that section of highway in full daylight. Mid-afternoon sun. No darkness. No vulnerability. If the checkpoint appeared, it would be obvious. Visible. Undeniable. I crossed into Nebraska around 2 p.m. Mile marker 889. 890, 891. Nothing. Just road. Normal, empty road stretching ahead into the distance. No lights, no barriers, no gantries. Just the usual highway infrastructure and the vast prairie on either side. I felt relief wash over me like warm water. It was over. Whatever that thing was, it was done with me. Maybe it only appeared at night. Maybe I'd broken the loop by staying away. Maybe the whole thing had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination, and now that I'd had some distance from it, I was fine. My phone rang. Dispatch. "Yeah? Mason, we've got a problem. That load you're carrying? There's been a recall, potential contamination issue with the strawberries. You need to return it to Sioux Falls immediately." My stomach dropped. "What? I'm already in Nebraska." "I know. I'm sorry, man. It's not our fault. The shipper just sent out the notice. Turn around and bring it back. We'll reassign the load to someone else." I pulled over onto the shoulder. Sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. I'd have to go back north, back through that section of highway. And it was already late afternoon. The sun was dropping toward the horizon. I'd hit mile marker 891 right around dusk. That boundary time. When day becomes night. When things that hide in daylight start to emerge. "Mason, you copy?" Yeah, I'm turning around." I made a U-turn at the next crossover, headed north. Watched the sun sinking lower with every mile. The shadows lengthening across the prairie. Darkness gathering in the east like something alive. Mile marker 895. 894. 893. The sun touched the horizon, spreading blood-red light across the plains. Darkness rising. And there it was. The lights came on all at once, like something had thrown a switch. The gantry materialized from nothing, appearing between one moment and the next. The concrete barriers, the 3 lanes, but this time something was different. All 3 lanes said the same thing. Secondary inspection. No passenger vehicle lane. No expedited option. Just secondary inspection, mandatory, unavoidable. I could see other trucks ahead of me, lined up at the barriers. 6, maybe 7 of them. All with their engines running, parking lights glowing in the gathering dusk. Waiting. Always waiting. I pulled into line behind a Peterbilt. In my mirror, another truck materialized and pulled in behind me, boxing me in. No escape, no way to turn around. The barrier arms were all down, no one was moving through. The trucks just sat there, engines rumbling as if they'd been there for hours, or days, or longer. I tried the CB. This is northbound at the checkpoint. Anyone know what's going on? Static, dead air, like I was transmitting into a void. I climbed down from my cab. The driver of the Peterbilt ahead was doing the same. He was older, maybe 65, with a gray beard shot through with white, tired eyes that had seen too much. He looked at me and just shook his head slowly. "You too?" he said. His voice was rough, worn down. "What do you mean?" Tried to stay away. Tried different routes, different loads, different schedules. Thought I could outsmart it. He gestured at the checkpoint with one weathered hand. But it always brings you back, eventually. Always. "How many times have you been through?" He didn't answer directly. Just pulled a yellow form from his jacket pocket and held it up. I could see his signature at the bottom. Or rather, I could see the space where his signature should be. It was just a black smudge now, like he'd signed so many times the ink had bled together into an illegible mass, like he'd worn away the paper itself with repetition. "Don't fight it," he said quietly. "Just sign the form and move on. That's all you can do. That's all any of us can do." He walked toward the booth with the resigned shuffle of a prisoner walking to his cell. One by one, the other drivers climbed down and followed. Some I recognized from truck stops, from rest areas, from passing on the highway in broad daylight. Real people with real lives. Others were strangers, their faces blurred and indistinct even when I looked directly at them. But they all moved with that same defeated posture. Shoulders slumped, heads down, walking toward something they couldn't escape. I was the last one. I stood there on the pavement, watching them disappear into the booth one by one. The lights were brighter now, washing out the last of the sunset. The wind had stopped completely. Total silence, except for the electrical hum of the lights and the idle of my engine. I could run. Get back in my truck, throw it in reverse, crash through the barriers if I had to. Floor it and don't look back. But I knew with absolute certainty that it wouldn't work. That the highway behind me would just lead back here. That this was the loop and I was caught in it. Had been caught in it for years, maybe, signing and forgetting and signing again. The booth door opened. An officer emerged, not one of the ones from before. Younger, with a face I couldn't quite focus on. Every time I looked directly at him, his features seemed to shift slightly, like looking at something underwater. He gestured for me to come inside. I walked forward. My boots echoed on the concrete, each step sounding final. The door closed behind me with a sound like a vault ceiling. Inside, all the other drivers were sitting in plastic chairs arranged in rows, filling out yellow forms. They didn't look up as I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept writing, mechanically, their pens scratching in perfect unison. The officer led me to an empty chair in the back row and handed me a blank form. The paper was warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. But we were inside. There was no sun. "Read and sign," he said. I looked down at the paper. The same legal language I'd read before. The same paragraph about my memory being unreliable. But at the bottom, there was something new. A checkbox I didn't remember from last time. I acknowledge that this is my final passage and that I will not retain memory of this processing. Final passage. The words seemed to echo in my head. What did that mean? Final passage to where? I looked around at the other drivers. They were all checking the box, signing their names, handing their forms to officers who appeared from nowhere and vanished the same way. Then the drivers stood and walked back outside, their faces blank, their eyes empty, like they'd left something behind in this place, some essential part of themselves. "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked. The officer looked at me with those shifting features. "Then you stay here, in processing, until you do sign." "Forever?" "Time works differently here. Forever is a relative term. But yes, you'll sign eventually. Everyone does." I thought about the 47 signatures on that scanned form. About James Nolan's empty truck sitting on the shoulder, engine running, nobody inside. About the driver with the black smudge where his name used to be. I thought about Natalie, waiting for me at home, wondering why I hadn't called, about the mortgage and the bills and the normal life I had outside this place, about tomorrow and the day after and all the days I'd miss if I stayed here. I picked up the pen. The officer smiled, waited. I put the pen down. "No," I said. Silence. The other drivers stopped writing, stopped moving. All of them turned to look at me with those empty eyes. The officer tilted his head. "I'm sorry? I'm not signing. I don't acknowledge that my memory is wrong. I know what I saw. I know this place exists, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Not this time." More silence. Then the officer's face settled into something almost like curiosity. "This time? I've been through here before. I can feel it. I signed before and I forgot. But not this time. This time I remember. And I'm done signing things I don't believe. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. If you don't sign, you can't leave. Then I don't leave." I stood up, walked to the door, put my hand on the handle. Behind me, I could hear the officer moving. Footsteps. Multiple footsteps. "Stop," he said. His voice had changed, less flat, more urgent. I opened the door. Outside, everything had changed. The checkpoint was still there, but it was different. The lights were dimmer. The barriers looked old, rusted. The other trucks were gone. Just my Peterbilt sitting alone on empty highway. And the sky was wrong. Not dusk anymore. Not night. Just a gray nothing. Like all the color had been drained from the world. I turned around. The booth was still there, door open, the officer standing in the doorway. But beyond him, the interior was different. Not a processing center with rows of plastic chairs. Just an empty room with concrete walls and a single flickering fluorescent light. "You can't leave," he said again. But his voice was different now. Uncertain. Almost afraid. "Watch me." I walked to my truck, got in, started the engine. The familiar rumble felt like a lifeline to reality, to the world that made sense. In my mirror, the booth was changing. The walls becoming transparent, fading. The officer stood there watching, his shifting features finally settling into something I could see clearly. He looked tired, impossibly old, like he'd been standing there for centuries, processing driver after driver, collecting signatures, maintaining the loop. And for just a moment, I thought I saw something like relief in his eyes. Then, he was gone. The booth was gone. The checkpoint dissolved into nothing, leaving just empty highway stretching north into that gray, non-sky. I put the truck in gear and drove. The color came back gradually. First the asphalt, black and solid, then the grass on either side, green even in the fading light. Then the sky, darkening naturally toward evening. Real evening, the kind that follows real afternoon. I made it back to Sioux Falls, delivered the strawberries. Went home to Natalie, who hugged me tight and asked why I looked so shaken. I didn't tell her, couldn't explain it. Still can't really. That was 4 years ago. I still drive I-29, twice a week, sometimes more. I need the money, need the work. And maybe I need to prove to myself that I can. Every time I pass mile marker 891, I watch for the lights. Sometimes I see the empty Freightliner on the shoulder, engine running, nobody inside. Sometimes I see other drivers pulled over, staring at nothing, like they're waiting for something to appear. Sometimes I see them signing forms, yellow forms, in trucks that shouldn't be there. I've never seen the checkpoint again, not fully formed anyway, but I feel it sometimes. A heaviness in the air, a wrongness, the beginning of that electrical hum, and I hear it on the CB late at night. That same flat voice. Southbound commercial vehicle, approaching checkpoint. Reduce speed to 15 miles per hour and select your lane. I always respond the same way. Negative. I do not acknowledge. The voice never answers. But it asks again the next time. And the time after that. Patient. Persistent. Like it's waiting for me to forget. To slip up. To accept that my memory is wrong and the official version is right. But I won't. Because the moment I do, the moment I sign that form again and agree that this place doesn't exist, I'll be back in that plastic chair, back in the loop, and I don't think I'll get another chance to refuse. So I keep driving, keep watching, keep refusing to forget. Because memory is all I have left. Memory and the certainty that somewhere between South Dakota and Nebraska there's a checkpoint that shouldn't exist. A place that sorts people. A filter that separates those who accept the official story from those who trust what they've seen with their own eyes. And somewhere on a yellow form in that place, there's a space where my signature should be. An empty line from the time I refused to sign. A gap in the pattern. They're still trying to fill it. I can feel them trying. Every time I drive through. Every time that voice comes over the CB. Every time I see that empty Freightliner. They can keep trying. I'm done signing things I don't believe. And I'm done pretending that what I experienced wasn't real. This happened. The checkpoint exists. I was there. I saw it. I refused to forget. And that refusal, that one moment of resistance, might be the only thing keeping me human. Or maybe it's the thing that's trapping me here, unable to move on, condemned to drive this corridor forever, while others forget and move forward with their lives. I don't know anymore. All I know is that I'm still here, still driving, still watching mile marker 891, still waiting for the lights. The border crossing at Portal, North Dakota isn't supposed to be complicated. It's one of those small stations where the road just continues north into Canada, where the landscape doesn't change, just the flags and the currency. I've crossed there maybe 60 times in the past 5 years, hauling grain and machinery between Minot and Regina. It's never taken more than 20 minutes, until the night it took 6 hours, or 30 minutes. Or however long it actually was. I still don't know. My name is Cole. I drive for Midwest Continental, mostly agricultural routes through the northern plains. It's honest work, decent pay, and the roads are straightforward enough that you can almost do them on autopilot. Almost. This was mid-November 2017. I remember because it was 3 days before Thanksgiving, and I was trying to finish this run so I could make it home to Fargo in time for dinner with my sister's family. She'd asked me to come early this year, said her kids were excited to see their uncle. I hadn't been around much lately. The load was canola seed, heading to a processing facility outside Regina. Standard agricultural cargo, nothing that should raise any flags at customs. I had all my paperwork in order, phytosanitary certificates, commercial invoices, the whole 9 yards. Clean logbook, current medical card, truck inspection up to date. I should have sailed through. I reached the border around 10 p.m. The crossing was quiet. Just one other truck ahead of me at the booth. The lights were on, but subdued. Not the harsh security lighting you see at bigger crossings, just enough to see by. The Canadian flag hung limp in the still air. The truck ahead of me, a Volvo with Ontario plates, cleared the booth and rolled through. I pulled up to the window. The officer who leaned out was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of crisp professionalism that suggested he was relatively new to the job. Still going by the book. "Evening," he said. "Documentation, please." I handed over my passport, commercial driver documents, and the cargo paperwork. He flipped through them methodically, his flashlight beam tracking across each page. Behind him, I could see another officer at a computer terminal, the blue glow illuminating his face. "Purpose of entry? Commercial delivery. Canola seed to Regina. How long will you be in Canada?" "Just passing through. Drop the load and head back. Should be back across the border tomorrow afternoon." He nodded, still reading. Then he paused on one of the pages, frowned slightly, looked at his computer screen, then back at the document. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Just need to verify something. One moment." He stepped back into the booth. I could see him talking to the other officer, both of them looking at the computer screen, pointing at something. One of them picked up a phone. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. My engine idled, burning fuel. The night was cold enough that I could see my breath when I cracked the window. Finally, the first officer came back. His expression was neutral, professional, but something had changed. A tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Archer, I'm going to need you to pull over to secondary inspection." He pointed to a lane on the right, marked with orange cones. "Park there and bring all your documentation inside. Someone will be with you shortly." "Secondary? Why? What's the problem?" "Just routine. Shouldn't take long." But his eyes said something different. They said this wasn't routine at all. I pulled into the secondary lane. It was separated from the main flow of traffic by concrete barriers, a dead-end area with parking spaces for maybe 6 trucks. Only one other vehicle was there, a semi with Mexican plates, its driver nowhere in sight. I parked, killed the engine, and gathered my documents. The building marked secondary inspection was a low, concrete structure with narrow windows. Institutional, the kind of architecture designed to be functional rather than welcoming. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The waiting area had rows of plastic chairs, most of them empty. A vending machine in the corner flickered intermittently. Behind a plexiglass partition, I could see officers moving around, talking in low voices. There was one other person waiting. A driver, sitting in the far corner, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees. He didn't look up when I entered. I approached the window. A different officer, older, with gray in his beard, looked up from his paperwork. "Name? Cole Archer. I was told to come in for secondary inspection." He checked his computer, typed something. "Have a seat. We'll call you when we're ready." "How long will this take? I've got a delivery schedule." "Shouldn't be long." I'd heard that before. It always meant longer than you wanted. I sat down, 3 chairs away from the other driver. He still hadn't looked up. I could see his hands clasped together, knuckles white. He was gripping his own fingers hard enough that it must have hurt. The clock on the wall read 10:23 p.m. I pulled out my phone to text my sister, let her know I might be delayed. No signal. That wasn't unusual at border crossings. Sometimes the towers are on the wrong side, or the building's construction blocks the signal. I'd wait until I was back outside. 20 minutes passed. The officer behind the glass called out a name I didn't catch. The other driver stood up immediately, almost jerking to his feet, and approached the window. They had a brief exchange I couldn't hear. Then the driver was directed through a door to the right. He glanced back as he walked through. Just once. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. He looked terrified. I was alone in the waiting area now. The fluorescent lights continued their endless hum. The vending machine cycled through its display, illuminating candy bars and chips in sequence. Nobody came through the main door. No other drivers being sent to secondary. At 11:15, I approached the window again. "Excuse me, any update on when someone will see me?" The gray-bearded officer looked up. For a moment, I could have sworn he looked surprised to see me, like he'd forgotten I was there. "Soon," he said. "We're processing someone else right now. Shouldn't be much longer." I went back to my seat, checked my phone again. Still no signal. The time read 11:17 p.m. I waited. At some point, I'm not sure when, I realized the clock on the wall hadn't moved. It still read 10:23 p.m., the same time it had shown when I first sat down. I stared at it, watched the second hand. It was moving, ticking forward in its steady rhythm. But when I looked away and looked back, it was at 10:23 again. Maybe it was broken. Old institutional clocks broke all the time. But my phone said 11:43 p.m. now. Over an hour had passed. The door to the right opened. The other driver came out. He walked past me without looking, moving quickly, his face pale. He pushed through the main door and was gone. Cole Archer. I looked up. A woman officer stood at the door he'd just come through. 30s, dark hair pulled back, expression unreadable. "That's me. Come with me, please." I followed her through the door into a corridor. White walls. More fluorescent lights. Doors on both sides, all of them closed. Our footsteps echoed. She led me to a small room at the end of the hall. A table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner. Interview room. I'd never been in one before. "Have a seat," she said. "I just need to ask you a few questions about your cargo." I sat. She remained standing, clipboard in hand. "The canola seed you're transporting, where was it loaded?" "Mine it, 3 days ago." "And your destination?" "Regina, I already told the officer at the booth." She made a note. "Have you transported agricultural products across this border before?" "Yes, many times. This is a regular route for me." "And you've never had any issues? No rejected shipments, no quarantine holds?" "Never. Everything's always been clean." She nodded slowly. "The thing is, Mr. Archer, our system flagged your cargo manifest. There's a discrepancy." "What kind of discrepancy?" "The lot number on your phytosanitary certificate doesn't match the lot number in our import database." I felt my stomach tighten. "That's not possible. I verified everything before I loaded." "Nevertheless, there's a discrepancy. We're going to need to physically inspect your cargo to determine which lot number is correct." "Okay, fine, let's do that." "Our inspection team is currently occupied with another vehicle. It may take some time." "How much time?" "I can't say for certain. A few hours, possibly." Hours. My delivery window was at 6 a.m. If I didn't make it, the facility wouldn't accept the load. I'd have to reschedule, which meant lost time, lost money, possibly penalties from the shipper. "Is there any way to expedite this?" I asked. "I've got a tight schedule." "I understand. But we have our procedures. I'm sure you understand." She left me in that room. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there, staring at the white walls. The camera in the corner had a small light that blinked every few seconds. Recording. Always recording. I checked my phone. 12:04 a.m. Still no signal. I waited. At some point, I realized I couldn't hear anything. No voices from the corridor, no footsteps, no sound of vehicles outside. Just the hum of the lights and the occasional creak of the building settling. The door opened. A different officer entered. Male, young, wearing the same uniform but with different patches. He didn't introduce himself. "Mr. Archer, I need to ask you some questions about your travel history." "I already answered questions. The other officer said you were inspecting my cargo. This is separate. Standard security screening. Have you traveled to any foreign countries in the past year besides Canada?" "No." "Are you certain?" That word, it made something in my chest constrict. "Yes. Just the U.S. and Canada. I drive this route regularly." He made a note. "And how many times would you say you've crossed this particular border point?" "I don't know exactly. 60 times? Maybe more?" "Do you remember the dates of those crossings?" "No. Who remembers exact dates? It's part of my job." "But you're certain you've crossed here before?" "Yes. Many times." He studied me for a long moment, then he closed his notebook. "Wait here." He left. I was alone again. I stood up, paced the small room. 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. The camera tracked my movement with tiny mechanical sounds. I tried the door. Locked. My phone said 1:33 a.m. now. I'd been in this room for over an hour and a half. I knocked on the door. "Hello, I need to use the restroom." No response. I knocked again, louder. "Is anyone there?" Nothing. I pressed my ear against the door. Listened. The building was completely silent. Then I heard it. Faint, but distinct. A voice, coming from somewhere else in the building, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. And then another voice responding, the same cadence, the same rhythm. It was the same conversation, repeating, like a recording playing on loop. The door opened suddenly. I stepped back. The woman officer from before stood there. "The restroom is down the hall to the left," she said. "Please return immediately afterward." I followed her direction, found the restroom. It was institutional, white tile, harsh lighting, everything bolted down. I used it quickly, washed my hands, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, more than tired, haggard, like I hadn't slept in days. But I'd felt fine an hour ago. When I came out, the woman was waiting. She escorted me back to the interview room. We sat down across from each other again. "Mr. Archer, there's something we need to discuss about your documentation." "What about it?" "Your passport, the entry stamp from your last crossing. It's dated November 9th. "That sounds right. I crossed about a week ago." "Today is November 15th. "I know. But your logbook shows you've been in the United States continuously since November 9th. No record of exiting Canada." I stared at her. "Because I haven't. I crossed into Canada on the 9th, made my delivery and crossed back the same day. That's how it works." "But you don't have an exit stamp." "Canadian border doesn't always stamp on exit. They just record it electronically. Our system shows no record of your exit on November 9th. Then your system is wrong. I crossed. I made my delivery. I came back. Check with U.S. Customs. They'll have my entry record." She made another note. "We'll need to verify that. In the meantime, you'll need to continue waiting." "How much longer?" "I've been here for hours." She checked her watch. "You've been in this room for 45 minutes. "That's not—" I stopped, looked at my phone. It said 1:51 a.m. If I'd entered this room at 12:04, then she was right, 47 minutes. But it felt like hours. "Please wait here," she said. "We'll have this sorted out soon." She left again. I sat there trying to make sense of it. The time felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. Like I was experiencing duration differently than the clocks were measuring it. I must have been more tired than I thought. The drive, the stress of the delay, it was all catching up to me. Time always feels slower when you're anxious. The door opened again. The same male officer from before. Mr. Archer, I need to ask you some questions about your travel history. You already asked me that. This is separate. Standard security screening. Have you traveled to any foreign countries in the past year besides Canada? The exact same words. The exact same inflection. We already did this, I said. Are you reading from a script or something? He looked at his clipboard. Have you traveled to any foreign countries in the past year besides Canada? I already answered that, no. Just the US and Canada. Are you certain? I stood up. What is this? Why are you asking me the same questions? Please sit down, sir. No. I want to know what's going on. I've been cooperative. I've answered all your questions. My paperwork is in order. What's the actual problem here? He didn't respond, just looked at me with that neutral expression. Am I being detained? Do I need a lawyer? You're free to leave at any time, he said. But if you leave before we complete processing, you won't be permitted to enter Canada. Your cargo will be refused entry. Then I'm not free to leave. You're free to leave. You simply can't enter Canada. It was a trap, a word game. I could leave, but leaving meant failing my delivery, losing money, potentially losing my job. I sat back down. Have you traveled to any foreign countries in the past year besides Canada? He asked again. I answered. Again. The same answers. And he made the same notes, and then he left, and I waited. When the door opened next, I'd lost track of how many times I'd been asked the same questions. 3, 5. Each time a different officer, each time the same script, but this time was different. This time, there were 2 people. The woman officer and someone new. A man in a different uniform, darker blue, different patches. He looked older, maybe 50, with the kind of weathered face that suggested years of outdoor work before this job. Mr. Archer, the woman said. This is Officer Garrett. He's going to be taking over your case. Garrett nodded at me, but didn't offer his hand. I've reviewed your file. I have a few questions. More questions, I said. My voice came out flat, defeated. Sure. Why not? He sat down across from me. The woman left, closing the door behind her. I understand you've been here for a while, Garrett said. His voice was different from the others, less scripted, more human. I apologize for the delay. We're short-staffed tonight. How long have I been here? He checked his watch. About 2 hours, since 10:30 or so. I looked at my phone. It said 2:17 a.m. That would be almost 4 hours since I'd first pulled into secondary. Your watch is wrong, I said. He looked at it again. I don't think so. This is synchronized with the facility clock. Then the facility clock is wrong. I've been here longer than 2 hours. Perhaps it just feels that way. Waiting always feels longer than it is. He opened a folder. Let's talk about your cargo, the canola seed. You said it was loaded in Minot 3 days ago? Yes. And who loaded it? Which facility? I gave him the name of the grain elevator. He made a note. And before it was loaded, where was the seed stored? I don't know. I just pick up and deliver. I don't track the origin. But your phytosanitary certificate lists an origin facility. Do you know if that's accurate? I assume so. That's not my job to verify. He nodded slowly. The thing is, Mr. Archer, we called the facility listed on your certificate. They have no record of processing canola seed in the lot number on your paperwork. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. Nevertheless, that's what they told us. Which means either the paperwork is wrong, or the seed in your trailer isn't what you think it is. Then test it. Open the trailer and test it. We will, but that takes time. Lab analysis isn't instantaneous." He paused. "In the meantime, I need to ask you something. Have you ever transported anything besides what's listed on your manifest?" "No, never." "Are you certain?" There it was again, that word. "Yes, I'm certain. I don't smuggle. I don't carry contraband. I'm a commercial driver doing my job." He studied me. "You seem upset." "I've been sitting in this room being asked the same questions over and over for hours. Of course I'm upset." "The same questions? Who else asked you questions?" "The woman. And before her, a younger guy. Maybe 2 younger guys, I don't remember. They all blur together." Garrett frowned. "I don't see any record of previous interviews in your file." "What?" He turned the folder toward me. Inside were my documents, some forms, some notes, but no interview records, no transcripts, just basic information. "You're saying I wasn't interviewed?" I asked. "I'm saying there's no record of it, which is unusual." We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming, that constant background noise that you stop noticing until everything else goes quiet. "Let me check something," Garrett said. He stood and went to the door. "Wait here." He left. The door clicked shut. I was alone again with the camera and the lights and the white walls. I stood up, went to the corner of the room where the camera couldn't see me clearly, pulled out my phone. Still no signal, but I scrolled through my recent activity anyway, looking for something. Anything that would help me make sense of this. My last text had been to my sister at 9:47 p.m. "Crossing the border soon. We'll update ETA after customs." That was over 4 hours ago. She'd probably texted back. Would be wondering why I wasn't responding. I tried to compose a message anyway, even without signal. Maybe it would send later. But my hands were shaking and I couldn't think of what to say. "Help, I'm stuck at the border," sounded paranoid. "Everything's fine, just delayed." Felt like a lie. I put the phone away. The door opened. Garrett came back in, but he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, civilian clothes, suit and tie. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mr. Archer, this is Special Agent Morrison. He's with CBSA Investigations." Investigations. That word made my throat constrict. Morrison sat down. He had a briefcase, which he set on the table and opened. Pulled out more papers. A laptop. "Mr. Archer, how well do you know your employer?" "Midwest Continental? Well enough. I've been driving for them for 5 years." "And have you ever had reason to question their operations? Anything that seemed irregular?" "No, they're a legitimate company. They haul agricultural products." "Always agricultural products?" "Mostly. Sometimes industrial equipment." "Have you ever transported anything you weren't sure about? Anything where the paperwork seemed off?" "No. Why are you asking me this?" Morrison pulled out a photograph, slid it across the table. "Do you recognize this person?" It was a driver, maybe 40 years old, wearing a baseball cap, standing next to a truck. I didn't recognize him. "No. His name is James Wyatt. He drove for Midwest Continental, same route you drive, Minot to Regina and back." "Okay." "He was arrested 3 months ago at this border crossing. Smuggling operation. Falsified cargo documents. He's currently awaiting trial." I stared at the photograph. "I don't know him. I don't know anything about that." He said the same thing you're saying, that he was just a driver doing his job, that he had no idea his cargo wasn't what the paperwork claimed. Then maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe. Or maybe he was lying. Morrison closed his laptop. "The point is, we have reason to scrutinize shipments from Midwest Continental more carefully now, which is why you're here. You think I'm smuggling something. I think your cargo documentation has discrepancies that need to be resolved. What you're smuggling, if anything, remains to be determined. I'm not smuggling anything. Then you have nothing to worry about. The inspection will prove that." He stood up. Garrett stood up with him. "Wait," I said. "How long is this going to take?" "As long as it takes," Morrison said. "We'll be in touch." They left together. I sat there processing what I'd just heard. My company was under investigation. Another driver had been arrested. And now they thought I was part of it. But I wasn't. I'd never transported anything illegal, never falsified documents, never done anything but drive my route and make my deliveries. Unless I had and didn't know it. Unless someone at Midwest Continental was using drivers like me as unwitting mules. Loading our trailers with something other than what the paperwork said, counting on us being clean enough to pass routine inspections. It was possible. It happened. I'd heard stories, but not to me, not my company, except that other driver, James Wyatt. He'd probably thought the same thing. The door opened again. It was the woman officer from before. "Mr. Archer, you're free to go to the waiting area while we complete the inspection." "The waiting area?" "Yes, through here." She led me back down the corridor, but we didn't go to the original waiting room. She took me through a different door, into a larger space. This waiting area was different. Bigger. More drivers. Maybe a dozen of them scattered across rows of plastic chairs. All of them had that same hunched, defeated posture. None of them were talking. They just sat there, staring at nothing. I recognized one of them. The driver with the Mexican plates I'd seen in the parking lot. I sat down near him. "Hey, how long have you been here?" He looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, exhausted. "What day is it?" "It's Thursday. Early Friday morning, I guess." "Then 3 days? I've been here 3 days." I felt ice in my veins. "That's not possible. They can't hold you for 3 days without charging you. They keep saying it's almost done, that the inspection is almost finished. Just a few more hours." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "But the hours don't pass right here, you'll see." "What do you mean?" He just shook his head, looked away. I checked my phone. 2:43 a.m. I looked at the clock on the wall. It said 11:15 p.m. I stood up, went to the window where an officer sat behind plexiglass. Different officer. One I hadn't seen before. "Excuse me, I need to know how much longer this is going to take." He looked at me with that same neutral expression they all had. "Shouldn't be long." "That's what everyone keeps saying, but I've been here for hours. We're processing as quickly as we can. Can I at least call someone? Let my company know I'm delayed?" "You're free to use your phone." "There's no signal." "Then you'll have to wait until you're outside." "When will that be?" "When we've completed processing." Circular logic. Bureaucratic loop. No answers. I went back to my seat. Pulled out my phone even though I knew it was pointless. No signal, no way to communicate with the outside world. The driver next to me spoke quietly. "They won't let you leave." "What?" "Once you're in secondary, once they start questioning you, they don't let you leave. Not until they get what they want." "And what do they want?" He shrugged. "Depends. For some people, a confession. For others, just time. Wear you down until you'll sign anything, agree to anything, just to get out. But they can't do that. There are laws, rights. We're not in the U.S. anymore, different rules. And even if there weren't..." He trailed off. "You'll see. Time doesn't work right here." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was just stressed and confused, but I couldn't. Because I'd felt it too. The way minutes stretched, the way the clocks contradicted each other, the way the same questions got asked over and over. A door opened on the far side of the room. An officer called out a name. One of the drivers stood up, walked through the door. He didn't come back. We waited. I don't know how long. My phone said one thing. The wall clock said another. My internal sense of time had completely unraveled. At some point, I realized the other driver, the one from Mexico, wasn't sitting next to me anymore. I looked around. He was gone. I hadn't seen him leave. More names were called. More drivers disappeared through that door. And then Cole Archer. I stood up, walked to the door. A different officer led me down a different corridor. More white walls, more fluorescent lights. We passed a window. I looked out. It was daylight outside, full morning sun. But my phone said it was 3:17 a.m. "Keep moving," the officer said. He led me to another room, smaller this time. No table, just chairs arranged in a circle. There were 3 other drivers there. All of them looked exhausted. One was asleep with his head tilted back against the wall. "Wait here," the officer said. "Group processing will begin shortly." He left. I sat down. "What's group processing?" I asked the others. The one who was awake shrugged. "No idea. They just told us to wait." "How long have you been here?" "In this room? Maybe an hour? In the facility?" He laughed bitterly. I stopped counting. The third driver, a woman, older, with gray hair, spoke quietly. "Don't try to make sense of it. That's what they want. They want you confused, disoriented, more likely to make mistakes." Mistakes? Saying the wrong thing, admitting to something you didn't do, just to make it stop. The sleeping driver woke up suddenly, jerking forward. "What time is it?" Nobody answered because none of us knew. We sat in silence. And we waited. The door opened after what might have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. I'd given up trying to track time. My phone battery was at 15% now, the screen dimming to conserve power. The last connection to the outside world slowly dying. Morrison walked in, the special agent. Behind him came Garrett and the woman officer whose name I still didn't know. They positioned themselves around the room, not sitting, standing in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. Morrison spoke first. "Thank you all for your patience. We're conducting a coordinated investigation involving multiple vehicles and drivers. The purpose of this session is to give each of you an opportunity to provide information that might be relevant." The woman driver spoke up. "Are we under arrest?" "No, you're free to leave at any time. However, doing so will result in your cargo being refused entry and your company being flagged for enhanced scrutiny at all future crossings." Same trap as before. Free to leave, but not really. "We're going to ask each of you about your employer and your cargo," Morrison continued. "I want you to understand that cooperation will be noted favorably. Resistance or deception will not." He pulled out a folder, looked at one of the men. "You, name?" "Derek Hayes." "Who do you drive for?" "Northern Logistics, out of Minnesota." "What's your cargo?" "Industrial equipment, parts for mining machinery." "And you loaded where?" "Duluth, 4 days ago." Morrison made notes. Then he turned to me. "Cole Archer, Midwest Continental, canola seed from Minot." "That's right." "Tell me about the loading process. Who supervised it?" "The elevator operator. I don't know his name, just the facility." "You didn't verify the cargo yourself?" "I verified the seal. The paperwork, that's my job." "But you didn't actually see what was loaded." "The trailer was sealed when I got there. I checked that the seal number matched the paperwork." "So you're relying entirely on someone else's representation of what's in your trailer." "That's how it works. I'm a driver, not a shipping inspector." He wrote something down, turned to the woman. "And you?" "My name is Patricia Dalton. I drive for cross-border transport. I'm carrying textiles from Detroit." "How long have you been with cross-border?" 12 years. "And in those 12 years, have you ever transported anything that wasn't what the paperwork claimed?" She hesitated, just for a second, but Morrison caught it. "Miss Dalton? Once, maybe 7 years ago, I delivered a load that turned out to be mislabeled. Honest mistake by the shipper. It got sorted out." "Mislabeled how?" "The fabrics were listed as cotton, but were actually synthetic blend. It was a clerical error. But you delivered them anyway." "I didn't know until afterward." Morrison made a longer note this time. Then he addressed all of us. "Here's what you need to understand. We have evidence, concrete evidence, that multiple companies operating this route have been involved in systematic smuggling operations. Falsified documents, misdeclared cargo, intentional deception of border officials." He let that hang in the air. "Some of the drivers we've arrested have claimed they didn't know, that they were innocent transporters, and some of them were probably telling the truth, but some of them were lying." He looked at each of us in turn. "The question is which category you fall into. We're telling the truth," Hayes said. "We're just drivers. Then help us prove that. Tell us everything you know about your company's operations. Routes, procedures, contacts, anything irregular, anything that seemed off." "And if we don't know anything?" I asked. "Then you'll continue to sit here while we verify your cargo, which, given current backlogs, could take several days." Days. The word sent a chill through me. Patricia spoke carefully. "You can't hold us for days without charging us with something. You're not being held. You're waiting for processing. There's a difference. That's semantics. That's the law." Morrison closed his folder. "I'll give you all some time to think about what you want to tell us. Officer Garrett will stay here in case any of you remember something useful." He and the woman left. Garrett pulled up a chair and sat down, positioning himself between us and the door. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Derek Hayes spoke quietly. "This is insane. They can't do this." "They're doing it," Patricia said. The third man, the one who'd been sleeping, hadn't said anything during the questioning. Now he looked at Garrett. "I need to make a phone call. My wife doesn't know where I am." "There's a phone in the main waiting area," Garrett said. "You can use it when we're done here." "When will that be?" "When the investigation is complete." More circular logic, more bureaucratic walls. I stood up, paced to the window. Outside, the daylight had faded to dusk. But that didn't make sense. If it had been morning light earlier, dusk should be at least 12 hours away, unless I'd lost track of an entire day. "What time is it?" I asked Garrett. He checked his watch. 6:47 p.m. I looked at my phone. It said 4:02 a.m., and the battery was at 8% now. "That's not possible," I said. "What's not possible?" "My phone says it's 4 a.m. You say it's 6 p.m. Those can't both be true." He shrugged. "Phones malfunction, especially when they're low on battery. The time doesn't malfunction. Or you're in a different time zone and didn't adjust it. I'm 30 feet from where I started. There's no time zone change." He didn't respond to that, just looked at me with that same neutral expression. Patricia was watching me. "Your phone has been showing the wrong time too?" "Yes. For hours. Same here. Mine says it's 2:30 a.m. Has said that for the past hour, even though the clock on the wall keeps moving." We looked at the clock. It read 7:15 p.m. Derek pulled out his phone. "Mine's dead. Has been for..." He thought about it. I don't actually know how long. I lost track. The fourth driver checked his. Mine says 9:43 p.m., but that doesn't match any of yours. We all looked at Garrett. Our facility clocks are synchronized with atomic time, he said. They're accurate. Your devices are malfunctioning. All of them? Patricia asked. All malfunctioning in different ways? Electronic devices are unreliable. You should know that. There was something in his tone. Not quite defensive. More like rehearsed. Like he'd given this explanation before. How many drivers have you processed through this room? I asked. I don't track numbers. But it's more than just us. More than tonight. He didn't answer. Patricia leaned forward. What happened to the other drivers? The ones who were here before us? They completed processing and were released. Released to where? Released to continue their journeys or return to their point of origin, depending on the outcome of their inspections. And how long did that take? It varies. Always variations. Always uncertainty. Never a straight answer. The door opened. Morrison came back in with two other people I hadn't seen before. They wore different uniforms, darker, with patches I couldn't quite read. We need to conduct individual interviews again, Morrison said. Miss Dalton, please come with us. Patricia stood slowly. She looked at the rest of us and I could see fear in her eyes. Then she followed them out. The door closed. We waited. Derek spoke quietly to me. You said you've been here for hours? Since about 10 p.m. Best I can tell, it's been... I tried to calculate it. 8 hours, maybe? I've been here since Tuesday afternoon. I stared at him. It's Thursday night, almost Friday. I know, but for me it's only been maybe 12 hours. The time doesn't add up. The fourth driver leaned forward. My name's Mason. I haven't said much because I've been trying to figure out what's happening. And I think... He paused. I think they're doing something to us. What do you mean? I mean the time discrepancies aren't accidents. The repeated questions, the confusion. It's deliberate. They're trying to disorient us. Why? To make us more compliant. More likely to confess to something even if we didn't do it. It's an interrogation technique. Keep someone off balance. Mess with their sense of time and reality. Wear them down until they'll say anything. Garrett stood up. That's enough conspiracy theorizing. Then explain the clocks, Mason said. Explain why we all have different times showing. Explain why that window shows daytime and nighttime in the same hour. I don't need to explain anything to you. Because you can't. Garrett moved toward Mason. You need to calm down. I am calm. I'm just asking questions. Or is asking questions not allowed in secondary inspection? They stared at each other. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then the door opened again. Patricia was led back in by one of the unknown officers. She looked shaken, pale. The officer pointed at Derek. You, come with me. Derek stood, followed. The door closed. Patricia sat down heavily. Her hands were trembling. What did they ask you? I said quietly. Everything about my company, my roots, people I know, places I've been. They wanted names, dates, and specific details about deliveries from years ago. Things I couldn't possibly remember. She looked at me, and when I couldn't remember, they implied I was lying, that I was hiding something. What did you tell them? The truth. That I'm just a driver, that I don't know anything about smuggling operations. But I don't think they believed me. Mason spoke up. They're building a case. Or trying to. They want us scared enough to implicate someone else, even if we have to make it up. Garrett crossed his arms. That's not what's happening. Then what is happening? Mason asked. "Why are we really here?" "You're here because your cargo requires additional inspection." "For days?" "As long as it takes." "And what if the inspection finds nothing? What if we're all clean? Then you'll be released." "When?" "When processing is complete." Same circular logic. Same non-answers. The door opened. Derek came back. His face was ashen, and behind him was someone I recognized. It was the driver from earlier, the one from Mexico who'd been sitting next to me in the first waiting room, the one who'd said he'd been there for 3 days. "You," I said. "You disappeared. Where did you go?" He looked at me with empty eyes. "I'm still here. I never left." "But you weren't in the waiting room." "Wasn't I?" He said it like a question, like he wasn't sure himself. Morrison entered behind him. "Archer, you're next." I stood slowly. My legs felt weak. "Wait," Patricia said. "How many of us are there? How many drivers are being processed right now?" Morrison looked at her. "Does it matter?" "Yes, because if there are dozens of us, if this is happening to multiple people every night, then this isn't random, this is systematic. This is an ongoing investigation. I can't comment on the number of subjects. Subjects, not drivers, not people. Subjects." I followed Morrison down another corridor, different from the others. This one had windows on one side, looking into rooms, interview rooms, and in each one I could see someone sitting. Drivers. All of them alone. All of them waiting. How many? I tried to count as we walked. 10, 15. More? Morrison led me to an empty room. Same setup. Table, chairs, camera. "Sit down, Mr. Archer." I sat. He pulled out a file, but instead of opening it, he just looked at me. "Tell me about James Wyatt." "I already told you, I don't know him." "You drive the same routes, work for the same company. You've never crossed paths?" "Midwest Continental has dozens of drivers. I don't know all of them. But you know some of them. A few. The ones I see regularly at facilities. Names?" I gave him a few names. People I'd chatted with at loading docks and truck stops. Normal interactions. Nothing suspicious. "And did any of them ever mention anything unusual about the company?" "No. Nothing about falsified documents or misdeclared cargo?" "Nothing." He made notes. "Here's what I don't understand, Mr. Archer. Your company is under investigation. One of your colleagues has been arrested. Your current cargo has documentation discrepancies. And yet you claim to know nothing about any of it. Because I don't. That's quite a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence, it's the truth." "Or you're lying." "I'm not lying." "Then you're either incredibly naive or incredibly unlucky." I didn't know how to respond to that. He closed the file. "I'm going to give you some time to think. Really think about whether there's anything at all, you might have seen or heard that could help us. Because right now, you look guilty by association. And if you can't provide information that proves otherwise," he let the threat hang. "How long?" I asked. "How long what?" "How long do I have to think?" "As long as it takes." He left. I sat there alone. Looked at the camera, wondered who was watching. Wondered if anyone was watching. Or if I was just sitting here alone in an empty room while time moved differently on the other side of the walls. My phone was at 3% battery. The time display flickered, showed 4:17 a.m., then jumped to 11:32 p.m., then back to 4:17. The clock on the wall said 9:45 p.m. The light coming through the small window looked like early dawn. I closed my eyes and tried to remember when I'd last eaten. Last slept. Last felt certain about anything. I couldn't. And somewhere in the building, in rooms just like this one, a dozen other drivers were sitting alone. All of us waiting. All of us losing time. All of us trapped in secondary inspection. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure if I'd been asleep or unconscious, or just dissociated. The room looked the same. The light through the window looked the same. My phone was dead. The clock on the wall said 2:17 a.m. I had no idea what day it was. The door opened. Morrison again. But he looked different. Tired, like he'd been up all night. Which maybe he had. Or maybe it had been days for him too. "Your cargo inspection is complete," he said. I sat up straighter, and canola seed. Exactly as documented. No discrepancies in the actual cargo. Relief flooded through me. So I can go. The physical cargo is clear, but we still have questions about your documentation. The lot number issue hasn't been resolved. The relief evaporated. You just said there were no discrepancies in the cargo itself, but the paperwork still shows inconsistencies. We need to determine if that represents administrative error or attempted fraud. I don't create the paperwork. I just transport it. Nevertheless, you're responsible for ensuring its accuracy. How am I supposed to ensure accuracy of something created before I even pick up the load? That's a question for your employer. Circular logic again. Traps within traps. So, what now? I asked. Now, you wait while we follow up with the shipper in Minot and the receiving facility in Regina. Verify the lot numbers directly with them. How long will that take? They open at 8 a.m. We should hear back by mid-morning. I looked at the clock. 2:17 a.m. If it was accurate, that meant at least 6 more hours. Can I wait somewhere more comfortable? The waiting area? You'll stay here, less risk of confusion. He left. I put my head in my hands. 6 more hours, at minimum. And that was assuming the clock was right, assuming time was passing normally, assuming any of this was real. I must have dozed off again because the next thing I knew, the light had changed. Brighter. Morning sun streaming through the window. The clock said 2:17 a.m. I stared at it. The second hand was moving. Tick, tick, tick. But the time hadn't changed. The door opened. Officer Garrett. "Good news," he said. "We heard back from the facilities. The lot number was a clerical error. Your documentation has been corrected. So I can leave?" "Almost. Just need you to sign some paperwork acknowledging the correction and confirming your cargo." "Fine. Let's do it." He led me to a different room. Not an interview room, more like an office. There was a desk with forms already laid out. "Read these, and sign at the bottom," he said. I picked up the first form. It was dense with illegal language, standard disclaimers and liability waivers. I started to read it carefully. "It's just confirmation that you received your corrected documentation," Garrett said. "Standard procedure." But I kept reading. And halfway down the second page I found a paragraph that made me stop. "By signing below, I acknowledge that any delays in processing were due to legitimate security concerns and that I have no complaints about the duration or methods of inspection. I further acknowledge that I entered secondary inspection at 2247 on November 15, 2017, and exited at 0132 on November 16, 2017, for a total processing time of 2 hours and 45 minutes. I looked up at Garrett. "This says I was here for less than 3 hours. That's correct." "That's not correct. I've been here all night. It's morning now. It's 1:30 a.m. I looked at the clock on the office wall. It said 1:31 a.m. "The sun is up," I said, pointing at the window. "It's daylight outside." Those are security lights. The facility is illuminated 24 hours. I went to the window, looked out. He was right. They were lights. Powerful ones. Bright enough to look like daylight. But above them, the sky was dark. Night. I don't understand, I said. You're tired. Disoriented. It's natural after a stressful inspection. But according to all our records, you entered secondary at 10:47 p.m. and it's now 1:32 a.m. 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's not possible. Nevertheless, that's what happened. He pointed at the form. If you disagree with the official timeline, you can refuse to sign. But that means we'll have to extend your processing while we investigate the discrepancy. Another trap. Sign and accept their version of reality, or refuse and stay here longer. I thought about Patricia and Derek and Mason, about the driver from Mexico who'd been here for 3 days but probably had signed something saying it was 3 hours. About all those rooms I'd seen, full of drivers, all of them waiting. About what would happen if I refused to sign. If I sign this, can I leave immediately? Yes. Your truck is ready. Your cargo is cleared. I looked at the form again. At that paragraph claiming I'd only been here for 2 hours and 45 minutes, every instinct screamed that it was wrong, that I'd been here much longer, that time had moved differently in this place, but I had no proof. My phone was dead. The clocks all said what they said, and Garrett was offering me a way out. I picked up the pen. Wait, I said. The other drivers, the ones who were in the group processing, what happened to them? They're still being processed. Why? If my cargo was clear, theirs might be too. Each case is different. They'll be released when their processing is complete. When will that be? I can't discuss other cases with you. I wanted to refuse, wanted to demand answers, wanted to not sign this form that rewrote reality. But I was so tired, so disoriented, and the promise of leaving, of getting back in my truck and driving away from this place, was overwhelming. I signed. Garrett collected the forms. You're free to go. Your truck is in the secondary lot where you left it. Here are your documents. He handed me a folder. Drive safely. He led me back through the corridors, but they looked different now, shorter, less maze-like. We passed the waiting area I'd been in earlier, but it was empty. All the chairs vacant. Where is everyone? I asked. Most processing happens during daytime hours. It's quiet at night. But I'd seen the rooms, the other drivers, unless that had been... What? A different night? A different time? We reached the exit. Garrett held the door open. I stepped outside into cold air. The parking lot was there. My truck was there, right where I'd left it. I walked to it in a daze, climbed into the cab. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. My coffee cup in the holder, cold now. My clipboard on the passenger seat. My jacket draped over the back of the chair. I started the engine. It turned over immediately, reliable as always. The barrier arm lifted. A sign lit up. Cleared to proceed. I pulled forward slowly, through the checkpoint, back onto the highway heading north into Canada. In my rearview mirror, the secondary inspection building got smaller. The lights faded. And then I was just on a normal highway in the middle of the night, or early morning, or whatever time it actually was. I drove for an hour before I found a truck stop. Pulled in, parked, and just sat there. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in. Waited for it to charge enough to turn on. When it finally booted up, it was flooded with messages. My sister, my dispatcher, all time-stamped from the past 12 hours. The most recent was from my dispatcher sent at 1:15 a.m. Archer, you missed your delivery window. Regina facility won't accept the load now. You need to return the cargo to Minot. Call me ASAP. I checked the timestamp on my exit from the border. According to the forms Garrett had given me, 01:32 a.m., November 16th. According to my phone's GPS history, 01:34 a.m., November 16th. 2 minutes difference. Everything aligned. But I remembered daylight. Remembered it being morning, afternoon, evening. Remembered hours and hours of waiting and questions and disorientation. I called my dispatcher. "Archer, what the hell happened?" "I got held up at the border. Secondary inspection." "For how long?" I looked at the forms. They say 2 hours and 45 minutes. 2 hours? That made you miss a 6 a.m. delivery window? I crossed around 10:30 p.m., got cleared at 1:30 a.m., then had to drive to Regina. I would have gotten there around 5 a.m., but what? I don't know. I must have. I stopped, pulled over. Lost track of time. Jesus, Archer, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. Well, take the load back to Minot. We'll reschedule with Regina, and maybe take a few days off after this run. You sound like you need it. Yeah, maybe. I hung up, sat there staring at my phone. 2 hours and 45 minutes. That's what the official record said. That's what I'd signed confirming. But I'd been there longer. I knew I had, even if I couldn't prove it. I pulled out the folder Garrett had given me, my documents, my corrected cargo paperwork, and at the bottom, a business card. Officer D. Garrett, CBSA, Secondary Inspection Unit, with a phone number. I flipped the card over. On the back, handwritten in small letters, "You're not the first. You won't be the last. Don't try to understand it. Just drive away and don't come back." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I put the card in my glove box, started my engine, and headed back south. Back to Minot. Back to the familiar routes where time moved normally and clocks agreed with each other. I've driven past that border crossing dozens of times since then, but I've never pulled in. I always find a different route, a different crossing, even if it adds hours to my trip, because sometimes, late at night, I'll see trucks in the secondary inspection lot, parked in neat rows, waiting. And I wonder how long they've really been there. I wonder if their drivers are sitting in small rooms signing forms that say they've only been there a few hours. I wonder if time is moving the same for them as it is for me. And I never, ever want to find out the answer. The card is still in my glove box. I've never called the number, never tried to contact Garrett. But sometimes I take it out and read those words again. Don't try to understand it. I've taken that advice. I drive my routes, I make my deliveries, I cross borders at different checkpoints, and I never talk about the night I spent in secondary inspection at Portal, North Dakota. Because even now, years later, I can't tell you how long I was really there. All I know is that when I finally got home, my sister said I'd been gone for 4 days, but my logbook says it was 1 night, and the forms I signed say it was 2 hours and 45 minutes. And somewhere in that building, there's a clock that's always showing the wrong time. Or maybe it's showing the right time, and it's the rest of the world that's wrong. I don't know anymore. I just know that I'm never going back, and that's enough. I've crossed the border at Sweetgrass, Montana, maybe 200 times in my career. It's one of those crossings that feels more like a formality than a real checkpoint. Just a handful of buildings on the windswept prairie where Montana becomes Alberta. On a clear day, you can see the Canadian Rockies in the distance, blue and permanent against the sky. The crossing itself is straightforward. You pull up, show your documents, answer a few questions, and you're through. 5 minutes, maybe 10 if they're busy. I've done it so many times I could navigate it in my sleep. But there's something I need to tell you about that crossing. Something that happened 3 years ago that I've never been able to explain. My name is Nolan Pierce. I drive for High Plains Transport out of Great Falls. Mostly agricultural runs up into Alberta. Grain, livestock feed, equipment. The kind of cargo that's been crossing that border since before there were trucks to haul it. This was late February 2018. Dead of winter on the northern plains, when the cold is so intense it feels like the air itself might shatter. I was hauling a load of feed grain to a ranch outside of Lethbridge. Standard run. I'd done it a dozen times that winter alone. I left Great Falls around 8 p.m., planning to cross the border around midnight and make my delivery by dawn. The roads were clear. No snow, just that bone-dry cold that makes everything brittle. The kind of night where your truck is the only sound for miles, just the diesel rumble and the wind. The drive up I-15 was uneventful. I passed through Shelby, then Sunburst, watching the mile markers count down to the border. The radio played quietly, some late-night talk show I wasn't really listening to. Just background noise to keep me company. At 11:47 p.m., I saw the lights of the border crossing ahead. That's when I noticed something was off. The crossing was lit up like always, but there was something about the quality of the light. Too bright, maybe. Or too white. It made the darkness around it seem deeper, more absolute. Like the checkpoint existed in its own pocket of reality, separate from the prairie around it. I slowed down as I approached. There were no other vehicles. Not unusual for this time of night, especially in winter. Most commercial traffic crosses during business hours. I pulled up to the Canadian booth. The officer who came out was someone I didn't recognize. That wasn't particularly strange. There was turnover at these small crossings, new faces appearing regularly. But something about him made me pause. He moved too precisely, too deliberately, like every gesture had been rehearsed. "Good evening," he said. His voice was flat, professional. "Documentation, please." I handed over my passport and commercial papers. He took them without making eye contact, studied them under his flashlight. "Purpose of entry? Commercial delivery. Livestock feed to Lethbridge." "How long will you be in Canada?" "Just for the delivery. I'll be heading back south tomorrow afternoon." He nodded, still reading. Then he looked up at me. In the harsh light from the booth, his face looked wrong somehow. Too smooth, like a mask. "Have you crossed at this point before?" "Many times. It's a regular route for me." "And you've never had any issues?" "Never." He studied me for a long moment. Then he handed back my documents. "Pull forward to the inspection area, please." My stomach sank. "Is there a problem?" "Routine inspection. Pull forward to the red line and wait." I wanted to argue, wanted to point out that I'd crossed here dozens of times without issue, that my paperwork was clean, that this was unnecessary. But you don't argue with border officers. You comply and hope it goes quickly. I pulled forward to where he'd indicated. A red line painted across the pavement, about 50 yards past the booth. I put the truck in park and waited. In my side mirror, I could see the officer talking on a phone. He kept looking at my truck while he spoke. After a moment, he hung up and disappeared into the booth. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The wind had picked up. I could feel the truck rocking slightly, that particular kind of prairie wind that comes out of nowhere and cuts right through you. The temperature gauge on my dash showed 18 degrees. Cold enough that if I had to get out, I'd need to bundle up. At 15 minutes, a different officer emerged from the building. Older, with gray hair visible under his cap. He walked toward my truck with that same, too precise movement. I rolled down my window as he approached. The cold air rushed in, stealing my breath. "Mr. Pierce, I'm Officer Briggs. I'll be conducting your inspection tonight." "Is there a specific concern? I've crossed here many times without issue." "Just routine. We run random inspections. I'm sure you understand." "How long will this take?" "Shouldn't be long. I'll need you to open your trailer." I climbed down from the cab, the cold hitting me like a physical force. Briggs followed me to the back of the trailer. I worked the lock with numb fingers and swung the doors open. The interior lights clicked on, illuminating bags of feed grain stacked neatly from floor to ceiling. Everything exactly as it should be. Briggs climbed up into the trailer. I heard him moving around inside, the rustle of bags being shifted. Then silence. "Mr. Pierce, can you come up here, please?" I climbed up. Briggs was standing in the middle of the trailer, shining his flashlight at something on the floor. "What am I looking at?" I asked. He pointed. "That." It was just the trailer floor. Metal ridges, some dust, nothing unusual. "I don't see anything." "Look closer." I crouched down, still nothing. Just a normal trailer floor. "I'm not sure what you want me to see," I said. He turned off his flashlight. In the sudden darkness, I realized I could see something. A faint glow, coming from between the floor panels. "What is that?" I asked. "That's what we're going to find out." He climbed down. I followed, my heart starting to race. I had no idea what was under those floor panels. The trailer wasn't mine. It belonged to the company. I just hooked up to whatever they gave me and drove. "I need to bring in our technical team," Briggs said. "This is going to take some time. You can wait in the building if you want. There's a waiting area." "Can I call my dispatcher? Let them know I'm delayed?" "You can try. Cell reception out here is spotty." I checked my phone. One bar, I sent a text to dispatch. "Held up at border for inspection. Will update." Briggs led me to the building. It was smaller than most border facilities, just a main room with a counter, a couple of offices, and a door marked secondary. "Wait here," he said, gesturing to a row of plastic chairs. "Help yourself to coffee if you want." He disappeared through the secondary door. I sat down, pulled out my phone. The text to dispatch showed as sent, but I had no idea if it had actually gone through. The waiting area was cold, despite the heating vents blowing warm air. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. I kept my jacket on, kept my hands in my pockets. There was a clock on the wall. It said 12:23 a.m. I waited. At some point, I must have dozed off because I jerked awake to the sound of the door opening. Briggs came through, along with another officer I hadn't seen before. They were talking in low voices. I caught fragments. Never seen anything like it. Protocol isn't clear. Need to call regional. Briggs noticed me watching. He came over. "We're going to need more time. We found some anomalies with your trailer that require further investigation." "Anomalies? What kind of anomalies?" "I can't discuss an ongoing inspection, but I need to ask you some questions. Can you come with me?" He led me through the secondary door into a small interview room. Table, chairs, camera in the corner. Standard setup. "Have a seat, Mr. Pierce." I sat. He sat across from me, pulled out a notebook. "How long have you been driving for High Plains Transport?" 8 years. "And in that time, have you ever had reason to question the cargo you were hauling?" "No. They're a legitimate company, agricultural transport." "But you don't actually verify the cargo yourself, do you?" "I verify the seal. Make sure the paperwork matches. That's my job." "So you're relying entirely on your company's representation of what's in the trailer. That's how it works in this industry." He made a note. "The trailer you're pulling. Is it company-owned or leased? I don't know. I just hook up to whatever they assign me. But you've pulled this particular trailer before. I thought about it. Maybe. They all look the same to me. Unit number TN4782. Does that sound familiar? I pulled out my logbook, checked my recent entries. Yeah, I pulled it last month on a run to Calgary, and before that, looks like 3 times in January. And you never noticed anything unusual about it? No, it's just a trailer. He wrote something down. Mr. Pierce, have you ever been approached by anyone asking you to transport undeclared goods? No. Have you ever been offered money to look the other way during an inspection? No. What is this about? We have reason to believe your trailer has been modified. There's a compartment between the floor panels that shouldn't be there. My stomach dropped. I don't know anything about that. Are you certain? That word again, certain. The way he said it made it sound like an accusation. I'm certain. I just drive. I don't modify trailers. But someone modified this one. Then it was someone at the company, not me. He studied me for a long moment. Wait here. He left. I sat alone in that room, mind racing. A hidden compartment. What was in it? Drugs? Money? Something worse? And if they found something, would they believe I didn't know? Or would they assume I was part of it? I checked my phone. 1:47 a.m. Still only 1 bar of signal. No responses to my text. The door opened. A different officer entered. Woman, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in a single glance. Mr. Pierce, I'm Officer Wade. I'm going to need to ask you some questions. I already answered questions. These are different questions. How well do you know the other drivers at High Plains Transport? Well enough. I see some of them at the depot. We talk. Any of them ever mention anything unusual? Anything that seemed off? No, they're just drivers like me. What about your dispatcher, the people who assign your loads? What about them? Do you trust them? The question caught me off guard. I guess so. I mean, I've worked with them for years. But have you ever questioned where your loads come from? Who arranges them? That's not my job. Maybe it should be. She pulled out a photo, slid it across the table. Do you recognize this person? It was a man, maybe 50, standing next to a truck. I didn't recognize him. No. His name is Marcus Webb. He drove for High Plains Transport. Same routes you drive. Okay. He was arrested 6 months ago. Smuggling operation. He claimed he didn't know about the hidden compartments in his trailers. My mouth went dry. I don't know him. I don't know anything about smuggling. He said the same thing. She pulled the photo back. The question is whether you're telling the truth or whether you're better at lying than he was. I'm not lying. Then you're incredibly unlucky or incredibly naive. She stood up. We're going to search that trailer completely, every inch of it. That's going to take time. You should get comfortable. She left. I sat there, panic building. If they found something, anything, illegal in that trailer, I was done. Even if I convinced them I didn't know, my career was over. No company would hire a driver who'd been caught hauling contraband, even unknowingly. My phone buzzed. Finally, a response from dispatch. What's the holdup? You should have been through by now. I typed back, they're searching the trailer, found something, don't know what yet. The reply came quickly. What do you mean, found something? What did they find? Hidden compartment. They think smuggling. Long pause, then, Jesus Christ, Nolan, what did you do? My hands were shaking as I typed, nothing. I didn't know about any compartment. Stay there. Don't say anything else until we get you a lawyer." A lawyer, the word made it real, made it serious. I put the phone down, stared at the white walls. The camera in the corner with its blinking red light. How long had I been here? I checked the time. 2:14 a.m. Wait. I looked at my earlier text, sent at 12:23 a.m. That was less than 2 hours ago, but it felt like much longer. Like I'd been sitting in this building for half the night. I stood up, went to the door. Locked, I knocked. "Hello? I need to use the restroom." No response. I knocked again, louder. "Is anyone there?" Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. The building was silent. No voices, no footsteps, no sound of activity. Just silence. Then I heard it. Faint, but distinct. An engine, starting up. I went to the small window in the room. Looked out. In the parking lot, I could see my truck, and around it, officers were working. Installing something. Equipment I didn't recognize. One of them climbed into my cab. "Hey!" I shouted, pounding on the window. "That's my truck!" They didn't react. Didn't even look up. I pounded harder. The window rattled but didn't break. The officer in my cab started the engine. My truck. And then he started to drive it away. "No! Stop!" I was screaming now, slamming my fists against the window. "You can't take my truck!" But they could, and they were. I watched my truck, my livelihood, disappear into the darkness beyond the checkpoint lights. Then the door to the interview room opened. Briggs stood there. "Mr. Pierce, please sit down." "You're taking my truck? Where are you taking it?" "To a secure facility for processing. Standard procedure." "That's not standard. You can't just take someone's truck." "We can, when we have probable cause to believe it's been used in criminal activity." "I didn't do anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about." "Sit down, please." I sat, because what else could I do? Briggs sat across from me, pulled out a form. "I need you to sign this acknowledging that your vehicle has been impounded for investigation." "I'm not signing anything." "Then you'll be held until you do." "You can't do that." "We can. And we will." He slid the form toward me. "This doesn't admit guilt. It just acknowledges that we've taken possession of your vehicle. If you're innocent, as you claim, you'll get it back when the investigation is complete." "How long will that take?" "Could be days. Could be weeks. Depends on what we find." Weeks. I couldn't afford to be without my truck for weeks. What if I refuse to sign? "Then you stay here until you do, and your truck stays impounded. Either way, you're not driving it out of here tonight." I looked at the form. Standard impound notice. Just acknowledging what was already done. My phone buzzed. Another message from dispatch. "Lawyer is en route. Should be there in 3 hours. Don't sign anything." 3 hours. I looked at Briggs. "I want to wait for my lawyer." "That's your right. You can wait in here." He stood, took the form with him, started toward the door. "Wait," I said. "Can I at least wait somewhere more comfortable?" "This is the only available room. We're operating with minimal staff tonight." He left. I was alone again. I checked the time. 2:47 a.m. 3 hours until the lawyer arrived. If time moved normally, if this place followed normal rules. But something about that thought made me pause. Made me look at the clock on the wall. It said 12:23 a.m. The same time it had shown when I first entered the building. I looked at my phone. 2:47 a.m. I looked back at the wall clock. Still 12:23 a.m. The second hand was moving. Tick, tick, tick. But the minute hand hadn't advanced. I stood up, went to the window again. Outside, the lights were still on. The checkpoint still visible. But something was different. The barrier arm at the exit. It was up. Had it been up before? I couldn't remember. And there was a sign I hadn't noticed. Lit up in green letters. Cleared to proceed. But I wasn't cleared. My truck was impounded. I was being held for questioning. So why did the sign say I was cleared? I tried the door again. Still locked. But as I stood there with my hand on the knob, I felt it turn. The door swung open. The corridor beyond was empty. No officers. No activity. Just fluorescent lights and silence. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I stepped into the corridor, looked both ways, saw the exit sign at the end glowing red. I should wait for the lawyer, should stay in the room like I'd been told. But something was pulling me toward that exit. Some instinct that said if I didn't leave now, I might not get another chance. I walked down the corridor. My boots echoed on the linoleum. Every step sounding too loud, too obvious. I reached the exit door, put my hand on it. Behind me, a voice. "Mr. Pierce." I turned. Briggs was standing there. But he looked different. Faded, somehow. Like I was seeing him through a filter. "Where are you going?" he asked. I don't know. The door was open." "The door is always open. You're free to leave at any time." "But you impounded my truck." "Did we?" He gestured to the window. I looked out. My truck was sitting in the lot, right where I'd parked it. "But I saw you take it. I saw officers drive it away." "Did you?" He tilted his head. "Or did you fall asleep and dream it?" "I wasn't asleep." "Are you certain?" I looked out the window again. My truck was definitely there, engine off, empty. "I don't understand," I said. "You should go," Briggs said. "Your delivery window is approaching. But the inspection is complete. Your cargo is clean. You're cleared to proceed. You found a hidden compartment." "Did we?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or did we find exactly what we expected to find? Nothing." My head was spinning. "What's happening?" "You're being released. You're free to go." He walked past me to the exit door, pushed it open. "Unless you'd prefer to stay." Cold air rushed in. Beyond the door, I could see my truck. Could see the barrier arm, still up. Could see that green sign, cleared to proceed. "I don't want to stay," I said. "Then go." I stepped through the door into the cold. Briggs didn't follow. The door swung shut behind me. I walked to my truck in a daze, climbed into the cab. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. My coffee cup, my clipboard, my jacket. The keys were in the ignition. I started the engine. It turned over immediately. In my rearview mirror, I could see Briggs standing in the doorway of the building, watching. I put the truck in gear, rolled forward slowly toward the barrier. It was already up. The sign glowed green. Cleared to proceed. I should have been relieved, should have felt lucky. But all I felt was wrong. Like something had happened that I couldn't quite remember. Like I'd agreed to something without realizing it. I passed through the barrier. Into Canada. The checkpoint receded in my mirror. Getting smaller, the lights fading. And then, just before it disappeared completely, I saw something. Other trucks, dozens of them, parked in rows behind the building. All of them dark, all of them empty. Or maybe not empty. Maybe full of drivers who'd been told they were free to go, but who hadn't left. I drove faster. The highway stretched ahead into darkness. I pushed the truck to 70, then 75, wanting to put distance between myself and that checkpoint. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see lights, expecting to be pulled over, told there had been a mistake, that I wasn't actually cleared. But there was nothing behind me, just empty highway and darkness. After about 20 miles, I pulled over at a rest area, parked and sat there with the engine idling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I checked my phone, 3:14 a.m. Multiple messages from dispatch, increasingly concerned. The last one, sent at 2:52 a.m. Lawyer is on the way, should be there by 6 a.m., sit tight. But I wasn't there anymore. I was 20 miles into Canada, apparently cleared through customs, even though I couldn't remember actually being cleared. I called dispatch. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hey, it's Nolan. I'm through the border. They cleared me. I'm not sure what happened, but they let me go. I'm heading to Lethbridge for the delivery. Call me back." I hung up, stared at the phone. Something was very wrong. But I couldn't articulate what. Just a feeling. Like waking up from a dream and not being sure what was real. I pulled up my text history. Read through the messages I'd exchanged with dispatch. They're searching the trailer. Found something. Don't know what yet. But when I climbed down and went to check the trailer, everything looked normal. The lock was secure. The seal was intact. No signs that anyone had opened it. I worked the lock and swung the doors open. Shined my phone's flashlight inside. Bags of feed grain. Stacked neatly. Everything exactly as it should be. I climbed up into the trailer. Went to the spot where Briggs had shown me the glowing compartment. Nothing. Just normal floor panels. No glow. No gap. No sign of any modification. I checked every inch of that floor. Solid. Intact. Normal. Had I imagined it? Had I fallen asleep in the waiting room and dreamed the whole thing? But the messages on my phone were real. The conversation with the dispatch about the search, about the lawyer, that had happened. Except maybe it hadn't. I climbed out of the trailer, closed and locked the doors, got back in the cab. I needed to make the delivery, needed to finish the run. Everything else could be sorted out later. I pulled back onto the highway. The truck handled normally. Responded normally. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. Because every few minutes, I'd see something in my peripheral vision. Movement, like someone was sitting in the passenger seat. But when I looked, there was no one there. Just my jacket draped over the seat back. I turned on the radio, found a station playing classic rock. Turned it up loud enough to fill the cab with sound. Anything to drown out the silence. The highway markers counted up. 10 kilometers. 30 kilometers. I should have been feeling relieved. Should have been grateful that whatever suspicions the border officers had, they'd let me through anyway. But all I felt was dread. Like I'd left something behind at that checkpoint. Something important. Or like something had followed me from there. At 50 kilometers into Canada, I saw headlights behind me. Far back, but gaining. Moving fast. I watched them in my mirror, a single vehicle, coming up quick. Border Patrol? Coming to pull me over? To tell me there had been a mistake? But as the vehicle got closer, I could see it wasn't marked. Just a civilian car. It passed me doing at least 90, disappeared into the darkness ahead. I exhaled, realized I'd been holding my breath. This was ridiculous. I was fine. I was cleared. I was just tired and stressed and letting my imagination run wild. I needed coffee. Needed to wake up properly, shake off whatever weird fugue state I'd been in. There was a truck stop ahead. I pulled in, parked, and went inside. The place was nearly empty. A couple of truckers at the counter, nursing coffee. A clerk reading a magazine behind the register. I poured myself a large coffee. Added cream and sugar. Paid the clerk. "Long night?" she asked. "You could say that." "Border delays?" The question made me pause. "How did you know?" "Most truckers coming through this time of night had to cross at Sweetgrass. If you're just getting here now, you must have been held up." "Yeah, little bit." She nodded sympathetically. They've been doing a lot of random inspections lately. Real pain. Have you heard of them finding anything? Like compartments and trailers? She frowned. Compartments. Hidden spaces for smuggling. Oh, sure. That happens. They caught a big operation a few months back. Bunch of drivers got arrested. You remember any names? She thought about it. Not off the top of my head, but it was a big deal, made the news. I thanked her and went back to my truck. Sat in the cab drinking coffee and thinking. If there had been a big smuggling bust, that would explain why Border Patrol was being extra thorough. Random searches, looking for modified trailers. But that didn't explain what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. That glow between the floor panels. Unless I'd imagined it. Unless Briggs had been testing me somehow, seeing how I'd react to an accusation. But why? What would be the point? My phone rang. Dispatch. Nolan, what the hell is going on? I got your message saying you're through the border, but the lawyer says he's at Sweetgrass and they're telling him there's no one in custody. No impounded vehicles. No one matching your description. What? But I was there. They held me for hours. Held you where? The lawyer talked to the night supervisor. They said they haven't had any secondary inspections tonight. No commercial vehicles at all. That's impossible. I was just there. Officer Briggs searched my trailer. There's no Officer Briggs on duty tonight. Nolan, are you okay? Did you hit your head or something? I felt cold spreading through my chest. I'm fine. I'm just confused. Where are you now? About 50 kilometers north of the border, at a truck stop. And your cargo? Intact. I checked it. Okay, look, just make your delivery. We'll sort this out when you get back. But Nolan, maybe take a few days off after this run. You sound like you need rest. Yeah, maybe. I hung up, sat there staring at nothing. The border crossing claimed I'd never been there, but I had messages on my phone proving I'd contacted dispatch from there. Proving something had happened. Except when I scrolled back through my messages, the texts about the search were gone. Not deleted, just absent. The conversation with dispatch jumped from crossing the border soon, straight to, what's the holdup? As if the messages about the hidden compartment, about the impound, about the lawyer, as if none of them had ever existed. I checked my sent folder, my deleted folder, searched for keywords. Nothing. They were just gone. I put the phone down with trembling hands. Either I was losing my mind or something very wrong was happening. Something beyond my understanding. I started the truck and pulled back onto the highway. I needed to finish this delivery, needed to get back to something normal and familiar. The rest of the drive to Lethbridge was uneventful. I arrived just before dawn, made my delivery, got my paperwork signed. The ranch hand who accepted the load was friendly, chatty. Good to see you again, Nolan. Been a while. Yeah, had some delays. Border trouble? Something like that? They giving you a hard time? Not really, just took longer than usual. He nodded. I hear they're cracking down, looking for smugglers or something. You be careful out there. I will. After the delivery, I should have headed straight back south. Should have crossed back into the U.S. and put this whole weird night behind me. But I didn't. Instead, I drove back to Sweetgrass. Back to the border crossing. I needed to see it in daylight, needed to verify that it was real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I arrived around 9 a.m. The crossing looked exactly as I remembered it. Same buildings, same layout, nothing unusual. I parked in the lot designated for commercial vehicles and walked into the main building. A different officer was on duty. Young guy, friendly smile. Help you? I crossed through here last night, around midnight. I was wondering if I could talk to someone about the inspection I went through. He checked his computer. What's your name? Nolan Pierce. He typed, frowned. I'm not seeing any record of you crossing last night. That's what I was told. But I did cross. I have cargo delivery confirmation in Lethbridge. I had to have crossed. He looked at me with concern. Sir, our system logs every crossing. If you came through, you'd be in here, but there's no record of you at all. Can you check with the night shift? Talk to Officer Briggs? We don't have an Officer Briggs. He said his name was Briggs. Older guy, gray hair. The officer shook his head. We've got 4 people on night rotation. None of them match that description. And we didn't have anyone in secondary last night. It was quiet. But I was here. I was held in an interview room. My trailer was searched. He was looking at me like I was crazy now. Sir, I think there might be some confusion. Is it possible you crossed at a different point? No, it was here, Sweetgrass. Well, I don't know what to tell you. There's no record of it. I thanked him and left. Walked back to my truck on legs that didn't feel quite steady. Either every person at this crossing was lying, or I'd experienced something that hadn't actually happened. But it had happened. I knew it had. I climbed into my truck and just sat there, staring at the border crossing, trying to make sense of it. Then I saw something. Around the side of the main building, partially hidden behind a fence, there was another structure. Smaller, it didn't match the architecture of the main buildings. Looked older, more weathered, and painted on the side, faded but visible. Secondary inspection. I got out of my truck and walked toward it. The closer I got, the more wrong it looked. The paint was peeling. The windows were dark. It looked abandoned. I tried the door. Locked. I looked through the window. Inside, I could see dust-covered furniture, old filing cabinets, a desk with papers scattered across it, and on the wall, a clock. Stopped at 12:23 a.m. I backed away from the building. My heart was pounding. Can I help you? I turned. The young officer from inside had followed me out. This building, I said. What is it? Old secondary inspection facility. Been closed for about 5 years. We built a new one when they expanded the crossing. 5 years? Yeah. That one's scheduled for demolition, actually. Just haven't gotten around to it yet. And no one uses it? No one's supposed to. It's locked up. Why? I was just curious. He studied me. Sir, are you sure you're okay? You seem disoriented. I'm fine. Just tired. Maybe you should get some rest before you drive back. Yeah, maybe. I walked back to my truck. The officer watched me the whole way. I climbed in, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. Headed back toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, I could see the old secondary building, getting smaller as I drove away, and in one of the windows I could have sworn I saw movement. A figure, watching me leave. But when I looked again, there was nothing. Just an empty, abandoned building that I'd spent hours inside of last night, in a place that no one believed existed anymore. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to a library in Great Falls. Small, public library, quiet on a weekday afternoon. I needed to do some research. Needed to find out if I was crazy or if something else was happening. I used one of their computers to search for news about border crossing incidents, smuggling busts, anything that might explain what I'd experienced. I found the story the truck stop clerk had mentioned. Big smuggling operation broken up 6 months ago. Multiple arrests. But the details were vague. No names of drivers, no specific crossing mentioned. I searched for Sweetgrass border crossing anomalies, Sweetgrass unexplained delays, time loss at border. Nothing relevant came up. Then I tried Abandoned secondary inspection sweetgrass. One result, a local news article from 2013. Sweetgrass border crossing to close old secondary facility. The aging secondary inspection building at the Sweetgrass-Coots border crossing will be permanently closed next month as part of facility modernization efforts. The structure, built in 1947, has been plagued by electrical issues and structural problems in recent years. We've had ongoing problems with that building, said facility manager Robert Hayes. Lights that won't stay off, temperature fluctuations we can't explain. It's just time for a new facility. The new secondary inspection area will be integrated into the main building, allowing for more efficient processing of commercial vehicles. I read it 3 times. Lights that won't stay off. I scrolled down looking for more information, but that was the extent of the article. I searched for Robert Hayes, the facility manager. Found an obituary from 2015. Natural causes. No helpful information. Then I tried searching for specific incidents at the old building, using date ranges from before it closed. And I found something. A forum post from 2011, posted on a trucking community site. The title, Weird Experience at Sweetgrass. The post read, "Has anyone else had a strange experience at the Sweetgrass crossing, specifically in the old secondary building? I got pulled in there last night for what they said was a routine inspection, but something was off about the whole thing. The officers seemed wrong. The time didn't match up. I was in there for what felt like hours, but my clock said it was only 20 minutes. And when I got back on the road, I couldn't find any record of the inspection in my paperwork. It's like it never happened. Anyone else experience something like this?" There were 3 replies. First, "You probably just fell asleep and dreamed it. Happens when you're overtired." Second, "I've been through Sweetgrass dozens of times and never had any issues. You sure you're not thinking of a different crossing?" Third, "I know exactly what you're talking about." I clicked on the third responder's profile. Username, driver9947. Last, active, December 2011. The user had made one other post in response to someone asking for more details. The old secondary building, late at night. They pull you in for inspection, but something about it feels wrong. Time moves differently. The officers don't seem quite real, and when you leave, there's no record of it happening. I've talked to 2 other drivers who experienced the same thing. We think it's some kind of test, or maybe a processing system we're not supposed to know about. Either way, if you go through it, don't fight it. Just answer the questions and leave when they let you, and don't try to go back. That was the last post from the user. I searched for more, but found nothing. I sat back in my chair. Stared at the screen. 3 drivers, at minimum, had experienced something similar. In the same building. The abandoned building that supposedly hadn't been used since 2013. But I'd been in it last night, in 2018. 5 years after it was supposedly closed. I printed the forum posts, cleared my search history, left the library. In my truck, I pulled out my phone and did something I probably shouldn't have. I called the main number for Canada Border Services Agency and asked to speak to someone about the Sweetgrass crossing. After being transferred 3 times, I got a supervisor. "This is Regional Supervisor Martinez. How can I help you?" "I'm calling about the secondary inspection facility at Sweetgrass, the old one. The old facility has been closed since 2013. "I understand that, but I was wondering if there are any records of it being used after that date, for any purpose. Who is this? My name is Nolan Pierce. I'm a commercial driver. I crossed through Sweetgrass last night and I was directed to that building." Pause. "That's not possible. The building is locked. It's not in use." "I understand that's what you believe, but I'm telling you I was there. I was processed by an officer who gave his name as Briggs. Longer pause. Hold, please. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. Finally, Martinez came back on the line. Mr. Pierce, I've checked with the night supervisor. They have no record of processing you last night. And I verified that the old secondary building was locked and secured. No one was in it. Then how do you explain? I can't explain what you think you experienced. But I can tell you with certainty that you were not processed in that building. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, thank you. I hung up. They were lying. Or they genuinely didn't know. Either way, I wasn't going to get answers from official channels. I drove home, parked my truck, went inside and collapsed on my bed. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, it was late afternoon the next day. I checked my phone. Messages from dispatch asking if I was okay, asking if I wanted my next assignment. I called them back. I need a few days off. Everything okay? Yeah, just need to rest. No problem, take the time. Let me know when you're ready to go back out. I spent those next few days trying to act normal, trying to convince myself that what I'd experienced was some kind of stress-induced hallucination, that I'd fallen asleep at the crossing and dreamed the whole thing, but I couldn't shake it. On the third day, I drove back to Sweetgrass, not to cross, just to look. I parked in the lot and walked around the old secondary building. In daylight, it looked even more abandoned. Weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. Windows grimy with years of accumulated dirt. I tried the door, still locked, but as I stood there, I heard something, faint, coming from inside. Voices. I pressed my ear against the door, definitely voices, talking, but I couldn't make out the words, and underneath that, another sound. A low, electrical hum. The building was supposed to be abandoned, supposed to have no power. But something was running in there. I backed away from the door, looked around. The main crossing building was visible from here. If anyone saw me snooping around, they'd probably call security. I walked back to my truck, sat there watching the old building, and as the sun set and darkness fell, I saw lights come on inside. Faint, flickering, but definitely lights, in a building that was supposed to be dark and empty and abandoned. I started my engine and left, but I knew I'd be back, because something was happening in that building, something that official records said wasn't happening, something that erased itself from logs and documentation, and I'd been through it, which meant either I was part of something I didn't understand, or I'd stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to know about. Either way, I needed answers, even if it meant going back to a place that technically didn't exist, to a checkpoint that processed people but left no records, to a border crossing that operated in the spaces between official reality. I needed to know what it was, and why it had let me go. Didn't go back for 2 weeks. Part of me wanted to forget about it, to accept that I'd experienced something I couldn't explain and just move on with my life. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that green sign, cleared to proceed. Every time I drove, I felt like something was following me, watching me, and I kept having the same dream. I was back in that interview room, and Briggs was asking me a question. The same question over and over. Are you certain? But I could never remember what I was supposed to be certain about. On the 15th day, I got a call from dispatch. Got a run for you if you want it. Grain to Lethbridge. Same route as last time. My stomach tightened. Through Sweetgrass? Yeah. You okay with that? I could have said no. Could have asked for a different route, a different crossing, but I needed to know. Yeah. I'll take it. I picked up the load in Great Falls, made sure all my paperwork was perfect, made sure the trailer was sealed properly, made sure everything was by the book, and I left at 8 p.m., timing it so I'd reach the border around midnight. The same time as before. The drive up was quiet. I kept the radio off. Wanted to stay alert, aware. Wanted to notice everything. At 11:52 p.m., I saw the lights of the crossing ahead. My heart rate picked up. My palms started sweating on the wheel. It looked normal, just like any other night. The modern facility brightly lit. The lanes clearly marked. No sign of the old building from the highway. I pulled up to the booth. A young officer came out, not someone I recognized. "Good evening. Documentation, please." I handed everything over. He checked it methodically. Purpose of entry: commercial delivery, grain to Lethbridge. How long in Canada? Just for the delivery. I'll be back tomorrow. He nodded, scanned something on his computer. "You're all set. Proceed through." "That's it?" He looked at me. "Were you expecting something else?" "No, last time I crossed here, I got pulled into secondary." "Well, everything looks clean tonight. Have a safe trip." The barrier lifted. That green sign lit up, cleared to proceed. I should have been relieved. Should have just driven through and continued my delivery. But instead I asked, "The old secondary building, is it still locked up?" The officer frowned. "Old building? I'm not sure what you mean." "The one that was closed in 2013, around the side of the main facility." "Oh, that." "Yeah, it's locked, scheduled for demolition." "Why?" "Just curious. I heard some stories about it." "Stories?" "About drivers being processed there, even after it was closed." He smiled, but it didn't look friendly. "Sounds like truck stop ghost stories. You shouldn't believe everything you hear." "Probably not." "Is there anything else?" "No, thank you." I pulled through the barrier, into Canada. Normal crossing, no delays, but instead of continuing north, I pulled into the parking lot on the Canadian side. Positioned my truck so I could see the old building. It was dark, just like the officer said, locked and abandoned. I waited. Midnight passed. Nothing changed. 12:15 a.m., still nothing. At 12:23 a.m., that time again, always that time, I saw the lights flicker on. Not in the modern facility, in the old building. Faint at first. Then stronger, fluorescent lights, casting that familiar sickly glow, and the door, which had been closed, was now open. I sat there, engine idling, watching. A truck appeared. I hadn't seen it approach. It was just suddenly there, pulling into the secondary lane that led to the old building. The driver got out, walked toward the door, disappeared inside. I waited for him to come out. 5 minutes, 10, 15. He didn't emerge. Another truck appeared. Same thing. Pulled in, driver got out, went inside. Then another, 3 trucks now, parked at the old building. Which wasn't supposed to be operational. I should have driven away. Should have continued my delivery and pretended I didn't see anything. But I needed to know. I climbed down from my cab. Started walking toward the old building. The closer I got, the more wrong it felt. Like the air was thicker. Like I was pushing through resistance. I reached the door. It was open, just like I'd seen. Light spilling out. I looked inside. The interior didn't match what I'd seen through the window before. No dust. No abandoned furniture. Instead, it looked active. Operational, like it was still 2011 or 2008 or whenever it had been in use. And sitting in the waiting area were the 3 drivers. Just sitting. Staring at nothing. None of them looked at me. I stepped inside. "Hello?" No response. I walked up to the nearest driver. He was young, maybe 30, wearing a Peterbilt cap. "Hey, are you okay?" He didn't react. Didn't even blink. I waved my hand in front of his face. Nothing. It was like he was frozen, or not quite present. They're waiting to be processed. I spun around. Briggs was standing there, exactly as I remembered him. That same too smooth face, those same empty eyes. "What is this place?" I asked. "I think you know. The old secondary building. It's supposed to be closed. It is closed, to most people, but not to everyone." He gestured at the waiting drivers. "These 3, for instance, they're being processed." "For what?" "That depends on what we find. And if you don't find anything, then they're cleared to proceed, like you were." But I don't remember being cleared. I remember being questioned. I remember them taking my truck. Did that happen? Or did you dream it? He tilted his head. "Memory is unreliable, Mr. Pierce, especially in places like this, places that exist in the gaps." "What gaps?" "Between one reality and another, between what's official and what's real. This building was closed in 2013, officially, but unofficially." He smiled. "It never stopped operating." "Why?" "Because some things need to be processed outside the normal channels. Some people need to be sorted without creating records." "Sorted into what?" "Those who can be trusted to forget, and those who can't." My blood ran cold. "Which am I?" "You're here, aren't you? You came back. That suggests you're in the second category." "What happens to people in the second category?" "That depends on what we decide to do with them." He pulled out a clipboard. "I have some questions for you." "I'm not answering anything. I want to leave." "You're free to leave at any time. The door is right there," he pointed. "But if you leave now, you'll always wonder. You'll always come back. You'll be trapped in the loop of not knowing. And if I stay, then you'll get answers, but you might not like them." I looked at the door, at the 3 frozen drivers in their chairs, at Briggs with his clipboard and his empty eyes. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "How many times have you crossed this border?" "I don't know." "Hundreds. And how many times have you been processed through this facility?" "Once. 2 weeks ago." "Are you certain?" That question again. I think so. But you're not certain." "How can I be certain when you keep telling me my memory is unreliable?" "Good question." He made a note. "Why did you come back tonight?" "I needed to know what this place is. And now that you're here, now that you can see it operating, what do you think it is?" I looked around, at the 2 bright lights, at the drivers who weren't quite present, at the door that led to interview rooms I'd been in before. "It's a filter," I said. "You're sorting people, deciding who remembers and who forgets." "Very good. And why would we need to do that?" "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to understand." He wrote something else. "Last question. If I told you that you could leave right now, with full memory of everything you've experienced, but that you'd never be able to cross this border again, would you take that option?" "What's the alternative?" "The alternative is that you're processed. Really processed. And what happens after that depends on what we find." "And what are you looking for?" "Certainty, Mr. Pierce. We're always looking for certainty." I stared at him, at this thing that looked like a border officer but was something else. Something that operated in abandoned buildings that weren't quite abandoned. Something that processed people in ways that left no records. "I'll take the first option," I said. "I'll leave. With my memory." "Are you certain?" "Yes," he smiled. "Good. Then you're cleared to proceed." He stamped something on his clipboard, handed me a card. It was blank, no name, no number, just a symbol I didn't recognize. "What is this?" "Proof that you've been processed. Keep it with you. If you're ever pulled into secondary again, at any crossing, show them this." They'll know. Know what? That you're one of the ones who remembers, who can't forget. He turned toward the door. You should go now, before you change your mind. I walked to the door, looked back. The 3 drivers were still sitting there, frozen, waiting. What about them? They'll be processed, and then they'll leave, and they'll never remember being here. Why don't you just let them go? Because they haven't made their choice yet. You have. I stepped outside. The air hit me like a physical force, cold and sharp and real. I turned to look back at the building. It was dark again. The door was closed. The lights were off, like nothing had happened. I walked to my truck, climbed in. The card Briggs had given me was still in my hand. As I looked at it, the symbol began to glow faintly. Then it faded. I put it in my glove box, started the engine, pulled out of the lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched the old building recede, getting smaller, disappearing into the darkness, and I knew I'd never go inside it again. But I also knew it would always be there. Processing drivers who got pulled into secondary, sorting people into those who forget and those who remember. And I was one of the ones who remembered, which meant I'd carry this knowledge for the rest of my life. This understanding that there are borders within borders. Checkpoints that exist in the gaps between official reality. Places where certainty is tested, and where the wrong answer can trap you forever. I made my delivery in Lethbridge, crossed back into the U.S. at a different point, went home. And I still drive, still cross borders, still make my runs, but I carry that card with me, always. And sometimes late at night when I'm approaching a checkpoint, I'll feel it grow warm in my glove box, like a warning, like a reminder, that I chose to remember, that I chose certainty over forgetting, and that somewhere, in every border crossing, there's a place like that old building, a place that processes the ones who ask too many questions, who don't forget when they're supposed to, the ones who look at the sign that says "cleared to proceed" and wonder what they're really being cleared for. I'm one of those people now, and every time I cross a border, I wonder if this will be the time they decide I remember too much, that I know too much, that I need to be processed again, really processed, in a way I won't come back from. But until that day comes, I keep driving, keep crossing, keep carrying that card, and I never, ever show it to anyone, because that's the price of certainty. You remember, and you can never forget, even when you wish you could.